Live from San Jose, California, is the Cohesity Build Day. My name is Jeffrey Powers behind the controls, and I'm going to turn it over to Alistair and Bharath right now.
Thanks, Jeffrey. It's awesome to be here in San Jose, just off the end of San Jose International Airport runway. If you hear a little bit of noise from outside the room, it's probably planes flying over. None of them have yet got too close to the building. I'm Alistair Cook, and joining me for this wonderful Build Day Live with Cohesity is, dang it, I've slipped his last name. Bharath. Yes. We had this conversation. I should have written it on the whiteboard in front of me. It is Bharath. Welcome, man. And what's your role with Cohesity?
Thanks for having me, Alistair. It's a blessing to be a part of this event, obviously. My name is Bharath Nagaraj. I'm a systems engineer here at Cohesity. I primarily work in Bay Area, East Bay, and handle customers on this side.
So quite a lot of direct contact with customers, hands-on, out doing field deployments, how they strike issues. And this week, as you've been helping me, you've also been helping customers with their escalations. Yeah. So it's one of the things we like is to get somebody who has hands-on experience out in the field to come in and help us through, and particularly to show the process that you'll get as you deploy a Cohesity solution. So what's our general plan at the moment is that we have a 4-node cluster that is not quite racked and stacked because we're here in a meeting room, so it's sitting there with
right there, right?
The mobile lab is attached to it, and we're going to deploy that out and start protecting some virtual machines, protecting some other data, and then have a look at actually doing operational tasks while that protection's in process, and then doing some restores and looking at some other parts of the platform.
Oh yeah. So that's a C21. 2515, I think, and yeah, it'll be good to kind of show the simplicity of the platform and how quickly we can get it rack stacked and installed regardless of the size. And a lot of times when I actually speak to the customers, they don't really understand until we actually show them. So yeah, it'd be good to kind of go through the entire process.
Cool. Well, should we take a quick look at the lab environment and also the preparation document, because an important part of the deployment process is to gather some information ahead and make sure your settings are right and you have the information you need.
Yep.
So this is the same lab environment that we've been using in past Build Day Live events. It's a 2-node vSAN environment with a 3rd node that runs the management cluster. We've got a few virtual machines running there at the moment.
Quite an impressive portable lab you have, Alistair.
It's an amazing amount of tech in a checked bag that I travel around the world with. Now, when we first started this engagement, we took a look at the spreadsheet that you use as the initial engagement, and this is not something that's off the public website, but all of the field engineers, people like yourself who go out and help customers, will bring this as part of the initial engagement.
Yeah, so typically before we're on site, probably a week before, either me or a professional services engagement person from Cohesity will walk the customer through what all are the requirements. As you can see, it's quite detailed from the networking standpoint, the cabling standpoint, and all the pre-work needed as well. And the idea is that we reduce any amount of human error, so we actually gather every input that we need to put. Not that there's that many to be added there, but yeah, so if we get the preparation right, then the process is smoother than.
Yeah, so good preparation is the way to head into a good deployment. So we are deploying a C2000 series with 4 nodes using SFP+. We've just got DAC cables connecting to my 10 gig switch. The nodes are currently built at 6.1.1D, which is the current long-term support release, which is good. We have Build Day Live as our cluster name, but it's going to be referred to as BDL, so we'll use BDL as the cluster name throughout.
That should work.
Standard passwords throughout, although I wouldn't recommend that in production. What else have we got in here? And on this side, we have information about the power requirements and cabling. So the 10 gig SFP Plus and the 4 1 gig Ethernet on this particular deployment. We're talking about that, although there's 1 gig network adapters in the physical nodes, you typically don't use those.
Yeah, we don't. Most of the storage traffic is routed through the 10 gig cables at the back, and that's where the virtual IP interface comes into play as well. So typically the only 1 gig that we deal with is for the IPMI BMC control.
Right, and we have those wired up as well. I think that was the end of the configuration in here. So our network configuration is that we're sending the network we're going to work over is being sent untagged into the cluster. That's the simplest configuration, makes our job easier at deployment time. But what's the support for VLAN tagging for doing the storage traffic?
Yeah, we can support VLAN tagging on our cluster, and that's typically some of the information that we kind of collect right up front. And just from a typical initial node discovery standpoint, I like to keep the switches in the most simplest configuration as possible. Typically, when the idea is that regardless of the number of blocks and nodes you have, I want to be able to discover all the nodes through that one node. So I move that to a access mode, so I can basically see all the traffic coming through and I can see all the nodes, but we can work with some complexities in the networking if there is.
Customers have some requirements in there. And then we have the IP address schema for the cluster that we have. So we have a node IP and we have a virtual IP. Can you talk through the differentiation between those two as well?
Yes, a node IP is mainly for management purposes. They both sort of share the same NIC at the back. The IPMI obviously is the BMC control for the servers that we have. The important one is the virtual IP, and that's the crux of our distributed architecture and load balancing that happens through these IP addresses. So these IP addresses sort of float around with different nodes, which is why we can kind of do non-disruptive upgrades, and we are much more tuned for node failures when there is active tasks going on, because these are the VIP, the virtual IPs are the storage IPs that the source and your VMware environments and your physical environments deal with during traffic.
So the node IPs are attached to the physical appliance, whereas the virtual IP can float. Normally sits one-to-one relationship, but if there's any kind of failure, that virtual IP can move.
Yeah, got that on the head.
Nice.
Yeah.
And there is in this spreadsheet a lot more information that we've made sure is right, but this is the one piece. This one page is really the data collection that's specific to the site. There's a lot of workflow and configuration information in there as well.
Yeah, so some of the other details are firewalls, the exact diagram of the cabling itself, and so the customer has exact idea of what we're going to do, and some more other pre-work that we do.
And this spreadsheet normally then stays with the customer as a record of what was built and of future as well, if that's required.
And we keep a copy just so everyone's on the same page.
Okay. Well, we have the configuration we're going to build out. What's our first step to configuring the cluster?
All right. So what people can see is that we actually have the cluster right here, and on the cluster there's a tag that has the cluster SSN, which is unique to all the Cohesity clusters that we ship. And what we need to do is basically using a MacBook or a Windows laptop, connect to the Ethernet port at the back of any of the nodes. We're going to basically connect to node 1.
So if I grab this URL here, and it's a standard form, we've just put a node, put the cluster ID in here. And so it's this piece in the middle here.
Yeah, that's the unique SSN basically.
That's the piece. It's not the serial number of the block, but it's the identifying number that's used by the Avahi serverless DNS.
Perfect. Yes.
So I can connect to that and proceed. Initial configuration is this is the admin.
This is the admin and admin
typed correctly.
Yep. And typically, if I have my switch configuration in the right mode and my networking is working fine, then I should be seeing the number of nodes that I've actually racked and stacked up on in my data center. So if I have 8 blocks, then that would translate to 32 nodes, all of which I should see through this one login over here.
So this is the first stage of validation, well, second stage of validation. The first stage of validation is we can connect to the name. The second stage is to see that we've got the right number of chassis and nodes in there. So I guess I get started in here. And there's my 4 nodes, and I want them all in one cluster. I guess in a large deployment, if I've got 8 blocks and there's 32 nodes, I might be building multiple clusters for multiple purposes in there.
Yeah, so we have customers that do a different kind of use cases. Our whole sell is that we can deal with heterogeneous workloads on a single cluster, but we do have some segregations around, VM, virtual machine, protect versus scale out NAS and things like that. So,
but I'll take all 4, and then I need to put in some addresses. So the IPMI addresses have been inherited from the existing configuration, and all these fields have an auto fill-in. They don't all have auto fill-in because we've tried running this before. And that's all simply the addresses that I took out of that spreadsheet, so that should match up to the addresses on the node IPs and the IPMI addresses in here. Cool. And we go continue to cluster settings, and it says, what else do we need to know from my cluster? Well, this one is going to be called build there live. It is going to be on the lab.local domain. Subnet gate. I like this remembering of data that I entered before, because typing this is not the most exciting thing to do. Admin and admin. Again, we should not stick with those. DNS.
That would be an optional field on search domains. If you have other search domains in your network, you want to add that. Otherwise, the input that you added for the cluster domain would be the single
was always included.
Yeah.
And then I can add my domain controller in here as my DNS server and also as my time server. You're saying that the time server is really important to us, that things go badly wrong if this isn't correctly configured.
Yeah, as we're a completely distributed architecture, so our health relies on all of these nodes being in time sync. So having the right time NTP server is very important for that, so that the clusters are basically in sync throughout. Typically in deployments, customers can use something like pool.ntp.org as well, something which if that's worked reliably in large deployments, or if they have a reliable time server, then I would just pause and make sure that we have that right.
And then my cluster host name, we're going to do bdl.lab.local, and my virtual IP addresses, we're getting those 61 through to.
Good at remembering IP addresses.
Well, I did define all the IP address ranges in here. Now, you're saying we should actually verify this beforehand, so you'd normally do a name lookup of that host name. So let's do that now.
Yeah, this is one of the pre-work that is included in the pre-install checklist, where we give the customer steps to basically add this round-robin DNS entry on their DNS server.
There it is.
Yeah, and so this is very important because, again, a distributed architecture, and we want to basically, at the point in time of ingest, all the data basically goes to all of these nodes. So, and this kind of comes in during node failures and upgrades as well. So we can seamlessly do some of these otherwise disruptive operations in other similar architectures. Here we can basically, if we have this right, then if in case there is one node failure, the system will continue operating without any hiccups.
And of course, we plan for a node failure fairly regularly in terms of doing things like updates and maintenance is going to cause a failover.
Yep.
and that's just a routine, normal activity.
Yeah, it's a beauty about the design that our engineers built. A failure was a norm in almost every platform essences of whatever we have on in our product. So yeah,
it's that idea that if you're not planning for failure, then you're planning to fail. And if failure is routine, for component failure is routine, but the service continues to operate. Option down here for encryption.
Yeah. So typically, this is a cluster level encryption setting. Now, the different granular levels of encryption that you can add with Cohesity. If your compliance is that you want encryption on everything that lands on Cohesity from a cluster standpoint, you want to put this option to be on right at the start. But it is currently a one-time set option. If compliance is not that strong and you want to basically apply encryption at rest at different granularities, we allow that by doing that at the storage domain layer. Of course, when we have external targets and when we move data to the cloud, you can do an encryption at flight on a per object basis as well. So different levels of granularity, but just flexibility as well that we're bringing.
So this is the least flexible, most strictly enforced encryption option would be to choose to encrypt the entire cluster.
That's correct. And that's FIPS 142 as well.
So we could choose in here to use FIPS compliant. Okay. I'm not going to turn on encryption because I don't think there's a lot of value in it for us. So I just create the cluster. And I guess that at this point there's a lot of side-to-side communication amongst those 4 nodes. They'll be starting to establish connectivity and build out the cluster.
Yes.
There we go. We've got some progress, and I think that's going to be a fairly uninteresting progress for a little while. And this might be a good time to go to a video of us of the unboxing of the appliance.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to go to the unboxing right now.
Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined by Bharath Nagarath. Bharath, what's your role with Cohesity?
I'm a senior systems engineer at Cohesity. I deal with a lot of customers in the East Bay area here.
Excellent. Well, we naturally enough have some hardware here in this large brown box in front of us, and the first thing we should do is open it up and take a look at what's inside.
Yep.
So, cut the tape. Always an exciting moment to cut the tape. And what have we got? More Cohesity branding.
Yep. We got rails, we got our bezel, and the box usually contains a quick start guide as well as 10 GB cables that we need to connect our box to.
Cool. And these rails look like they're quick connect rails?
Yep. It's
That'd be quick and easy to put into the... Great. All right. Well, we should take those out and set them aside.
All right.
We won't be needing them for this particular video because we're not going to install into a rack. So we'll, let's put those both on the side. And then box, just power supplies, but normally when these are retail delivered, there would be the SFP Plus.
Yeah, we usually have a conversation with the customer prior to being there. Do they want SFP Plus or what kind of a 10 GB cabling they want? And based on that, it gets shipped within the box.
Great. And of course, a nice pretty bezel there. And then the protective foam. Lovely.
Thanks, Alistair.
And what have we got in here?
Oh, this is some more extra padding,
Some
I guess.
more plastic and coating. All right, and so normally this is a lift out.
Yeah, yeah.
So fairly heavy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's a fairly heavy unit, and typically at the data center I have one other person helping me.
Right.
And there are ways that you can lighten the load as well by just removing the nodes at the back or the storage disks at the front. We actually have a legend that contains the entire mapping of the system. So in case you do remove any of these components, you can put it back without any problem.
Okay. Well, I think we can do a 2-person lift to get this out, and then the box out from underneath.
All right.
Nice. handholds in the plastic. Tracy, can you just whip the box out for us? Just, yeah. Fabulous, thank you.
Good.
Fingers clear.
You can,
clear off the plastic bag. So this is a fairly conventional 4 servers in 2U enclosure.
Yep.
I'm presuming we've got a release and slide out. So that's the actual node compute memory in there.
Yep.
I/O boards in the back. Nice. So this is PCIe flash, and then your network connectivity.
Correct.
10 gig network connectivity in there.
Yep.
Nice.
And I think this is the version where you have 2 10 gig NICs at the back.
2 10 gig SFP plus.
All our newer models actually have 4 as well.
Right.
Yeah. So,
And then a couple of 1 gig ports for management network.
yeah, so we typically use that to discover the cluster when we actually rack it up on site. We don't use as much the 1 gig ports apart from the IPMI for management.
IPMI, yeah. Nice.
Yep.
These back in. Dual power supplies again.
Yeah, again, it's a beauty about hyperconverged systems these days. It's just plug and play.
Very conventional.
Yeah. And if you actually look at the front over here.
Let's, if you want to help me turn it around to the camera a little. And then what have we got? We have the PCIe for acceleration in each node, and then we've got hard drives in the front for each node.
Correct. Yes.
And again, that's a configurable option. How many and how large?
Typically, we kind of pre-calculate that based on the model that you're choosing, but it mostly remains constant. In terms of the configuration and the number of disks, it remains the same on the 2U node. We have, I think, 4 disks per node over here in the front. And if you actually go in front over there, there's a little tab over here that you can pull. This typically, on one side, it basically gives you the configuration of all the disks that you have, what the arrangement is, because each node has its own mapping to the disks. And at the back here is actually the cluster SSN ID, which is the ID that we use when we're actually on site and when we actually run this cluster configure script to basically discover all these nodes.
Right. So it's not the layout of the disks is not just straight. Each column corresponds to one of the nodes. There are actually 3 adjacent disks that aren't a column.
Correct.
And that gets confusing if you're not expecting it.
Yeah. So that's why I mentioned in the beginning is because the most of the weight is around these disks and the nodes over there. If we actually end up replacing it or removing the nodes for some reason, we just have to make sure that the mapping kind of goes based on this legend provided here.
And it's all color-coded labels on the drives.
Yeah.
But this would be a you'd want to depopulate the whole thing if you're putting it above sort of halfway up a rack.
Yeah, in scenarios where you don't have a rack mount machine and things like that, I typically loosen this as much as I can because it gets kind of tricky if it's above your shoulder height and it is quite heavy.
Excellent. And really the hardware is fairly conventional in terms of being a hybrid hyperconverged platform, and that plays towards the story that this is actually a software-defined story rather than being specifically about this appliance, because the appliance could be from multiple vendors since you have partners hardware on which the software runs. Yeah,
that is our play, right? The idea is simplicity of our software will basically plug into any of the vendors around the Cisco, HP areas. So it's just it's a function of having the right capacity of disks, having the right RAM and CPU, and then the software just sits on top.
Yeah.
And this story kind of extends to even cloud as well, right?
Right. And we'll be playing with more of the implementation. We will be using this appliance, and when we get back into the live video, you'll see us deploy this appliance out as a cluster, and then later on we'll be having a good look at the cloud appliance as well. Well, thanks, Bharath. Thank you for joining us. Do stay tuned for more of the videos from the Build Day live event here at Cohesity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Now we have our cluster has completed setup, so it's sitting here, sitting at the ready to go on. Let's take a little look at the details of what the cluster build process did. We can see that there's been quite a lot has gone on in terms of configuring the nodes and setting NTP on them and starting services in here. But it didn't take a huge amount of time to complete out. It was actually done about halfway through that video, so it's nicely completed out. And it says go and hit one of the IP addresses, and presumably that's the IP address that what's physically node 1 has taken. So there isn't quite a direct correlation between the physical node slot in the box and the node number on the cluster that's been applied. That's not a tightly enforced relationship.
No, it isn't.
Enclosure.
It's I guess whichever node finishes the quickest would become the node 1 basically. But that's it's the beauty of distributed architectures. So.
And in the end, they're all just equal partners. They're not. There isn't one primary node or anything going on in here.
Exactly.
Still the default password at this stage. Yes, I think I might read through this license, maybe download it and use it to help me get to sleep tonight. But I'll just agree to it. Then I need to enter a license key, and the license key I have is a actual production one. So Jeffrey, can we just switch to camera while I copy and paste in my license key? All right, that one's it. So what's the process that we actually receive that license key as we're doing this deployment?
Typically, we once the cluster is set up, we will have that key ready to go for a particular customer. Or if we're doing some kind of a remote install, then I provide that through Salesforce, basically.
Right. So it comes in through your Cohesity SE is going to provide that information for you. Right. So what have we got in our front screen? We've got our dashboard for our BDL cluster here.
Yeah, this is our 6.1.1D latest version. Typically, the intention for this is to sort of be a single pane of glass as we kind of go through different stages of it, though. But in essence, this will give you a summary of what your protection runs look like, how many runs have succeeded, how many SLA violations you've had. That's typically some of the data around data protect that customers are very interested in, and also storage reduction and dedupe ratio. We tout that. We actually do global variable and deduplication. We handle all of these different heterogeneous workloads, so we actually get more room in the storage as compared to some of the others in the market. So seeing some good numbers out there always is helps us. So.
And of course, this is not very interesting since the cluster's only been up for 5 minutes. But over time, that will get to be a more useful console for us.
Yeah.
What else can we see in here, just in terms of the current state of the environment? Where would I go to look at some details of what I have?
Right. So where we are at right now is we just installed the cluster, so we want to know if all the nodes are healthy and what my storage capacity available would look like. So I would go to platform and click on cluster, and this gives you the cluster summary in terms of how much total usable you have, the hardware model, the number of nodes, and you can kind of dig deeper into some of the configurations that we've added, like the default partition that would give you all of your virtual IP addresses information. And one of the other pieces is the cluster ID as well, which our support channel will if we enable the support channel, then they can do SSH and for troubleshooting purposes if need be. So some of those details are fairly important. The other details are storage domain. If you actually go to the next tab, and this in essence is the scope of our data reduction policies. That's around global deduplication and compression, right? So remember we're speaking about different granularities of encryption. this is one level at which you can set encryption to be yes or no. And we can also do cloud tier option and change redundancy options on the fly as we kind of add data to the cluster.
Right. So one of the things I wanted to clarify is we talk about this as being a storage domain as the scope of the data reduction policy, but not the actual. If I turn on deduplication for multiple storage domains, it's global across all of those storage domains that I get deduplication. It's not constrained to just the actual scope of deduplication isn't just one storage domain.
Typically, the way customers configure is in most of my deployments, they have one storage domain. And this is a storage domain that it has all the metadata tagging. And when we actually do data transfers to the cloud or secondary side, the handshakes happen between storage domains. So this is the scope of the global data reduction per se. And this happens very rarely, but it does happen where you want to have workloads that do not dedupe at all. I push the customer to keep it within the storage domain. It doesn't really affect you, but you could have multiple storage domains if need be for certain workloads that do not dedupe at all or have completely different data policies.
There may be some compliance regimes that don't allow data reduction technologies.
That's right.
But no technical reason not to contain them together.
Yeah, no technical reason why we can't handle all of it in one, right? And some of the other pieces are, if you go to the nodes, that gives you what the, when we're actually doing node upgrades and things like that, this will give you a point-in-time update on, what the status of the node is, if it's upgrading, what version's at. You can kind of track that over here. And if you want to add more VLANs and other networking configurations, we have that tab there as well.
Right. Okay, so it looks like our cluster is up and healthy, has the 4 nodes we expected. What's our next process?
Actually, one of the values that that I try to provide, in proof of concepts or during deployments, how fast we can get to action, right? So I spend about an hour or two with the data center at most. If the install is as smooth as how it was today, it's probably going to be 30 minutes apart from the rack stacking and the adding of the network cable process. But I want to be, at my customer's desk as soon as possible, showing him the value soon. So what I do to begin with actually is to jump into a policy and show the ease of setup that we bring to the table.
So into the policy manager?
You click on the policy manager. We give you 3 cookie cutter policies, but more often than not, every business has its own frequency of, or what the frequency of the backup should be and the retention policy. But we do a little more than that. If we can pick a policy of your choice and then and kind of dig in a little bit more deeper.
Well, let's look at gold. I always like gold.
All right. So what you see over here in the screen is the first thing you see is the frequency of backup, right? So we actually have all of this conversation right up front, because when we actually size for the capacity that you have, we take into account what the frequency of backups are, how long the retentions are, and what your other compliance extended retentions need to be are as well. So it's just a matter of kind of taking that from our theory and just basically adding that over here from a policy standpoint. And the idea here is it's one-time set and leave. So we don't want to really come over here and keep changing parameters on a daily basis. We define the strategy right up front and we implement the strategy, right? And right, so you can change it to a policy that works for you, Alistair.
Well, my gold highest protection policy, I maybe want to be backing things up more than 6 times a day. Maybe I'm going to take my backup time down to 2 hours. And retention means that I'm keeping every one of those 2-hourly backups for 7 days before any of them are being cleaned out.
That is correct. Yeah, that's a local retention policy over here. As we kind of scroll down, we'll get a little more granular on, what else we can do there. And you notice the add log backup there, and the idea that you could have this policy applied to your VMware or your Hyper-V protection jobs, but also involve your SQL and your Oracle to kind of follow a similar policy.
So I can have one policy that applies to both virtual machine backups and physical database server backups in this case?
Yes, one policy for, I mean, if that works within your business use case, you can apply this policy for all your workloads.
Right, I've got, well, I can leave log backups in there as well. And then I've got an extended retention, so although I've got a 7-day, 2-hourly granularity for my full backups, I've also got multiple days worth of daily, weekly, monthly in there, and presumably I can add maybe every, what have we got down to every year? Every 1 year retain for, let's say I've got to do 10 years. I could do pretty long retention. It seems to be allowed in here, and presumably it's infinite retention if we lock it for compliance purposes.
Oh yeah, so you actually have a data lock switch right up at the top, so you can even basically lock all of your snapshots so it's never destroyed. But these are typically for compliance and legal purposes where you want these cookie cutter snapshots that's for weeks, months, and years.
Yeah, fit with your corporate data governance in here.
And one of the other options is you can actually set up a blackout window as well as a part of your policy. This is typically with customers who do not want traffic on their storage network during high peak hours, or they're using the shared kind of a storage network, and it's very congested to begin with. So we can add some alleviation there and kind of work around customer's environment by using these blackout windows.
But presumably we're trying to avoid that, because if the blackout window is long, we get a situation where we're not compliant with our backup policy because the backup window has stopped that.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And that for me is one of the things I love about policy-based management is that I set the policy and know that it is being enacted, and I only have to deal with the exceptions rather than having to watch every execution to see that they're compliant with the policy.
Correct.
And replication and archive and cloud spin, we're not going to hit quite yet.
Right, but it is also kind of interesting though, because apart from the policy being just the frequency of how long we do, how soon we do backups and things like that, you're also defining the strategy of what the data mobility looks like, right? And we'll get to it later, obviously, with our cloud agnostic architecture. But the idea is that when you actually move data from one site to another for DR purposes, you can set that as at the policy level, right?
And so I'm only having one impact to my production storage for both data protection and disaster recovery and compliance archiving.
Yes, and our customers find that as a very simplistic model to kind of design their data strategies.
Again, it's a whole lot of governance around the applications and the data which drives setting these policies. So if I just save up my change, making the gold policy a little more aggressive than it was, we're all in place.
Sweet. Now we'll look at what we want to back up in your environment, Alistair.
Okay, I want to back up my vSphere environment.
All right, let's again go to protection, and then you'll have a sources link there. And what you want to do is go to your top right corner and do register hypervisor. And here is where you could choose. If you actually scroll down, you can see vCenter. We can add ESXi host, Hyper-V. But for us, even cloud subscriptions is treated as a hypervisor as well.
Interesting that we can back up from the on-premises appliance some resources sitting up in AWS.
Oh yes, yeah. If we have a good enough bandwidth between the cloud and on-premise, it's a complete possibility.
Put in some credentials for my vSphere environment. And I'm just going to trust the existing certificate. And
yeah, we've added some more switches here to kind of tune to a vSphere environment. Sometimes it's not fully loaded, but in a lot of enterprises you have a lot of things going on. So
You know, I just noticed this second from the bottom one of auto-cancel backups of data store is running low on space, and that's going to be really important because whenever we're taking a backup function, at some point there's going to be an increase in the consumption of space on the data store, and the last thing we want is the backups to be the thing that runs us out of space. That's a very cool setting to have in here.
Yeah, for us, I think every strand of our design is based on keeping resiliency. So that's something that you will find common with Cohesity.
Yeah, the only thing worse than not having a backup is not having production.
Yeah.
And so I've typed something wrong in here, and I think it's that I didn't type my password correctly. I forgot it was the slightly more complex password. This time, happier. So now I've got my vCenter server and it's got 33 unprotected virtual machines. It's probably not the state that we want to live in.
Yeah. So yeah, you want to kind of jump right in and create a protection job.
So that'll be under protection and protection jobs.
There you go. Right. And you want to protect virtual servers.
So one that always trips me as I'm going through this user interface is that the job, the name of the thing that I'm creating has to be set first. I'm usually leaping onto the details behind. So I'm going to do gold folder as my name because I know that I'm going to be protecting with the gold policy all of the VMs in a particular folder.
Yep.
And so then we're going to select it as being our vCenter server. And nice search.
Yeah, so we give you quite a bit of latitude in terms of how you want to search for your objects. If you want it at a very simplistic, setup that you want to basically back up all of your assets of your virtual center for the perpetuity of all the VMs that come in, you have an auto protect option right to the right corner over there. And as soon as you click that, you'll see that every object underneath that particular hierarchy will get auto protected, and any virtual machine that basically comes in at a later point will be auto protected. But you can also kind of dig into some more granular stuff. You can search for a particular tag. You see the search bar right there. And you can search for basically a keyword, like I see a bunch of launchers. If you just do LAUNC, and then it basically filters down to all the launchers that you have, and then you can auto protect again at the highest level, but while applying the search key that you provided.
Right. Well, I wanted to protect things by folders rather than their names. So I was going to have a look in my folder hierarchy and find the folder in here. And this is exposing the names that are used internally in vCenter, which is why we get this VM folder in here. Yep. But I'm going to take this desktops folder here that contains 10 virtual machines, and I'm going to auto protect that. Yep. So that means any new VM added to this desktops folder is going to get added to my protection.
Yep. And it's a full VADP API integration. So for the largest segment, 95%, 96% of your infrastructure is agentless from a backup standpoint, and it applies to Hyper-V as well.
And I want to protect with that gold policy that I just changed, and I want to place that on my default storage domain since there is only one. And then we get some more detail around when this policy, this backup protection job should end, never. And we have QoS policies. What are they about for customers?
Right, so QoS it gives you some more granular control on what your performance should look like. And we don't really tune it as much in normal circumstances. But in scenarios where you have 7 to 8 different kinds of heterogeneous workloads, it gives customers some level of control on priorities. So if you want more shares from a flash perspective, then you can change that QoS to backup SSD. Then your ingest will become quite a bit more faster. But typically, I don't really mess with it because the performance that we get in most circumstances is very sufficient.
So you let the underlying system manage it, rather than doing this yourself. And we've got exclusions and app consistency, so that will be using the quiescing
Yeah.
And for Windows, the volume shadow copy integration.
Correct. Yeah, that's typically for app consistency. We can basically talk to the VMware agent on the system that can help us get the VSS copy, and that'll apply to databases and applications. And
then there's indexing control. So once the backup's done, are we going to index all of the content as well?
correct. So we do this at the at a virtual machine object level, as well as what we call as views or data stores. But yeah, it's enabled by default. But the idea is that sometimes you don't want certain pieces to be indexed as well. So we've added this particular setting over here, so you can go in and choose, a part of your file path that you do not want to get indexed.
There may be somewhere that has a high churn rate of temp files that you don't want indexed. It's a waste of time to index the temp files that are going to be deleted anyway.
Yep, and we actually have some of those.
I can see exclusions already in place.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let's start protecting those 10 machines, and that job starts. While that's going, why don't we protect some other things as well? I'm going to protect some more virtual machines, and this is going to be tag, and I'm going to use bronze priority. So this time, instead of using a object filter, I'm going to use a tag and just select here the bronze protection tag. So I've got some virtual machines that have the bronze protection tag. I set it there as auto protect on bronze, and you can see 3 virtual machines. So I have 3 VMs with that tag applied.
A lot of my customers, they really like that option because they want to actually they already have tags at the VMware vCentral level. So for us to basically seamlessly integrate to that means that it's lesser management overhead when you're, because to think about the systems over the past 6-7 years to kind of deal with Virtual Center and the different objects, it's not really easy. No matter what circumstances, we try to kind of bring some method to the madness there with this user interface, and hopefully it's been easy so far.
And if we've been using tagging to categorize the criticality of our applications, we can use that criticality tag to drive the data protection tag data protection activities as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll add them, and I said I wanted the bronze policy on those, and again default storage domain, and let's protect that. Cool. Bunch of protection. Let's one final protection. I want to select a particular machine. It's actually the domain controller that I'm RDP connected into to do all of the demo. I'm going to protect just that one machine, which we'll find in the management folder under host 0. Better yet, why don't I just search for it, because I know it's called DC. There it is. One virtual machine.
While he's doing that, we actually do have a question from the chat, and the question is, what happens if you have a machine, let's say one machine's in the gold policy, one machine's in the bronze policy, it's kind of overlooked. Will it go for the better one, or will it move to the lighter one, or which one will it go to?
Yeah, what happens if we have multiple protection jobs that include the same object, the same virtual machine?
Yeah, I think from a so when we're actually once we actually have a VM as a part of a policy, when we actually go into our user interface, it gives a notification saying that it is already being protected. So first of all, just preventing you from actually doing an operation like that. But if we were to, if you want it for some reason, then it's it should work fine. It'll basically run on both policies, because maybe there was a business requirement that's associated to it being protected on both different policies.
One of the things that might go on is that the virtual machine might have 2 different tags on it, one of which says it's a critical infrastructure server and one of which says it's part of an application, and those might drive 2 different protection policies.
You're right, yeah.
But I guess what you'd get is the combination of the 2 sets of protection. So if it was one of the protection policies said we want to protect every 4 hours, the other said every 2 hours, well, every 2 hours is going to cover your every 4 hours requirement.
Correct. And since all of these, when we kind of reconstruct our whole logical build that we have around our global deduplicated file system, it will be faster as well because we already have those blocks. So our you could probably do that, and it will be very quick in terms of just creating a snapshot of it.
So now we have some backups in progress, some protection going on. What we were going to do was show that we can do non-disruptive operations. So we're currently using the 6.1. Was it in my cluster nodes information? Everybody's on 6.1.1D release. That's the current long-term support release. So if I come across into the, this is the support site, and if I go into my downloads, this should show me that the, there we go, current long-term support release is the 6.1.1D that we're working with. So that's what you'd recommend customers run.
Yep. Long-term release is, yeah, that's a good version to be on. But you know, every now and then you have certain customers that have specific features associated to their business use case. That's when we kind of qualify them for some other releases that would be specific to that.
And that's this feature releases where I have access to version 6.2, and we wanted to show some of the features that are coming in version 6.2.
Yep.
And one of the things we wanted to show was the upgrade process.
Right, and the kind of workflow that we're kind of doing here, Alistair, is you know, is kind of like a proof of concept that I go through as well. You know, having the ability to do backups, having the ability to have your system functional while doing upgrades is one of our, you know, our unique properties.
Well, I think before that, where we get back to our dash note, we're good on there. Before that, those protection jobs finish, we should show that we can do the upgrade non-disruptively. So we've got a few minutes to get that started.
Okay.
What's the upgrade process look like?
Oh, very simple. Typically, I've actually let my customers, you know, do the upgrades themselves with a single click of a button. What you want to do is go to platform or admin, and then say upgrade cluster. And we basically say get new package, right? So we give you two options. One for customers that do not have internet access on their clusters, so they can basically bring in the package from another area and then basically upload it. Or if you have internet connectivity, it will download the package from the support site as well. And
I've previously downloaded from the support site, so I'm just going to upload now. That download was so that we wouldn't wait for that.
Right. And here's where the beauty of the distributed architecture kind of kicks in now, because we're kind of tuned for each of these nodes to basically upgrade themselves, and if a reboot is required or a re-imaging is required, it can take care of that. You can actually hear the cluster kind of working through that.
Spinning up its fans.
That's not a plane. That is a...
Yeah, so yeah, so you know, we're backing up. You know, when the upgrade happens, and if a reboot is required, then at most you lose that bandwidth coming from that one node. But at no point you're at, you know, serious risk of your SLA in any standpoint.
So if there is if throughput on 10 gig networks is across the nodes is likely to be a limiting factor, you design for n+1 to allow that +1, or you may even design for n+2 in a large environment to allow for a physical failure during an upgrade.
Yep, and that's the kind of conversation I have with the customers. That's game changing, because for us it's you know, our architecture does not have like centralized bottlenecks at different segments. The idea is, you know, what is your SLA, and we'll scale to that SLA to kind of give you the throughput and bandwidth you need.
Now, while I've got this tab monitoring the upgrade, it's connected to the 44th node address. When that node reboots, my console's going to go away. So I should probably connect to the, I'm going to connect to the DNS name, bdl.lab.local. No, it doesn't want to give me that. Let me try that again.
Yeah, there are two ways you can do it. You can either connect to the DNS name itself, or you can connect to
it doesn't like it.
The VIP IP address as well. Yeah, so
VIP is going to take a moment to negotiate the HTTPS. Let's just check in on the cluster upgrade. So where am I going? Cluster upgrade. So the cluster upgrade is in progress. I've got something wrong in there. Let's go for 64. What I did want to show was the protection job still in operation while we're doing this upgrade. So
yep.
That gold policy is completed. It's taking a little longer to back up my domain controller that we're connected to. And that upgrade is still in progress. What have we got? So we get detailed progress for each of the nodes.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting one as well, because it actually will give you the logs of what's happening on each of those nodes from a central console. And as soon as if you actually go down, you can actually see the different nodes being at different stages of the upgrade as well.
So suddenly we've got more progress here on this node that it's away and doing things.
Yeah.
When we did this in the test, the upgrade process took to run through, and as you can see, the protection job's still in operation. Jeffrey, could you line up the video that I did with Anand, where we looked at matching your workload to the configuration on your Cohesity cluster, please?
All right, Anand is coming up. Everybody else keep tuned for more live.
Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined for this video by Anand Nadatha. Anand, would you just tell us what it is that you do here at Cohesity?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Anand Nadatha, and I'm a Senior Director of Product Management for the Cohesity data platform under our Scale-Out NAS solutions.
What I thought we'd talk about was some of the considerations as customers deploying the Cohesity platform and the things they need to think about around designing solutions. And you had some perspectives around having different types of workloads, virtual machines, and maybe native SQL and those kinds of things. What sort of design considerations should we be thinking about?
First, thank you for choosing our platform. And then once you have chosen the platform for use, you want to think about the different workloads that you put in, as you rightly said. You may have a thought of using the platform for converging all of your secondary workloads. That's kind of the prime purpose of what the Cohesity platform can offer. But as you think of workloads that require, say, better performance from a throughput perspective. For example, you want to do a SQL dump. As you start designing and implementing views and storage domains, which I will explain a little bit later, you want to think of choosing the right QoS policies for those, because they all require better performance from an ingest perspective, and then potentially the application is performing all the dedupe and data reduction capabilities. Go ahead.
Pardon the interruption, but I just wanted to frame that, of course, because we're consolidating multiple use cases into one place, then there's certainly issues where you get a noisy neighbor effect and you get low priority things demanding lots of resources and high priority things that are getting starved of resources, and this is why the quality of service becomes important.
Absolutely correct. The moment you put in the different QoS policies for each of the workloads, the underlying system ensures that each of the workloads get the appropriate throughput and so on and so forth, right? So as you create what we call views, think of views as a logical container for where your application is writing data to, or it is a container from where your data is being served to applications, right? Because we also support NFS, SMB, and S3 protocols, a multi-protocol environment. So you could be hosting the platform for sending out data. So if it is an NFS environment, you probably want performance for NFS workloads, which are typically, say, home directories, and you may have 10,000 active connections at any point in time.
but it's small IOs and it's
Yes.
blocks, it's file share storage, so lots
So
and lots
files-
of parallel small
exactly.
IOs.
Small files. In a typical home directories, you'll find a lot of small files. But at the same time, you can also think of having a view for, say, an archive workload, which could be potentially, should I say, large files. Think of a legal environment where a customer is putting a lot of scanned images, or a bank putting a lot of scanned checks, or a video surveillance where people put some kind of images onto it. They are all large files, but they require a different kind of
large
performance.
sequential write doesn't mix
Exactly.
well with
doesn't
small
mix well
transactional.
with small, right? So along with all these, you're also going to find your backup sitting on the same place, because this is a hyper-converged environment. So you're going to see backup sitting along with these type of workloads. So this is where the next definition, as I called out earlier, storage domain comes into picture, which is a storage domain is a consolidation of the different views, right? So you could typically create more storage domains and have multiple views underneath that. You could have a set of policies for storage domain for, say, dedupe and compression, which says inline compression, inline dedupe. You could do all of those at the storage domain level, and at the same time you can go back and overwrite it at a view level. So you have that flexibility.
So we've got a two-layer structure here where that storage group is allowing us to do one set of policies, and then the view lets us have another set of policies, and the storage group is a container for a group of views, as well as presumably for some physical storage underneath.
Yes. So it allows you to, these are all at the logical layers.
Okay.
Right? These are all at the logical layers. So it allows you to have different levels of policies, and it allows you to do encryption. So it gives you the flexibility to choose what you want. So if you're a small organization, you're better off with just one storage domain and having multiple views. And you also have a construct of orgs in our product, which allows you to have, should I say, multiple tenants. So you can choose tenants and say, these tenants are fit for these storage domains, and these tenants fit in another set of storage domains.
So in-house, it may be that I've got a storage domain with strong encryption on it that fits to my financial component of my organization, and another environment that is no encryption because that's going to be less resources used for other workloads.
Yes. So I would say if you're thinking of putting multiple workloads, right, I would start with a fresh paper and pen and say, here is kind of what you want, right? And then that makes it very easier, because it's very easy to go and create a storage domain or a view with a few clicks, and then you will end up in the same spot as where you were before, which is oh, what did I do? So it will be best to organize what you want out of the system upfront, and then go and simply do it, because it's easy to create all these things. And the next thing you want to keep in mind is, how are you going to provide access to all these? So we also have a concept of RBAC. So you would have specific roles. So we have capabilities in the product, for example, locking. Locking requires special rights. So only people with those access privileges will be able to lock either a snapshot or either lock a given view. So we have file-level locking. So you want to be clear on which users are going to get what kind of access permissions. That's another consideration I would put in.
In this context, locking means this particular point in time of the data is not going to be cleaned out, not going to be garbage collected out at a point. Am I getting the right term on the locking?
Yeah, kind of. Locking allows you to retain a view, retain a snapshot for a period of time. So if you have any legal commitments and say, I want to retain this particular view for 7 years. So you can retain it for 7 years. So once you set the policy for 7 years, you don't have the ability to go and delete it, right? So this allows us to be a right fit for a lot of companies which have all these legal requirements compliance requirements, right? So that is another one that you want to be careful about. And the next one you pointed out was around the encryption. And then comes our native integration with the cloud, right? So this is something that is also set easily when you go into the storage domain and say all these can be easily archived off and archived off to an S3 target, right? So the question now is, where do you want to archive them off? Because sometimes you want to arrange your data based on what goes to the cloud versus what doesn't go into the cloud. So that's another consideration I would have before I lay out my data on the system. If your SQL data is all going to be on-premise and you're never going to archive it off to the cloud, yeah.
People compliance that you must keep it on premises.
Yes, it fits in well into that structure as well. So that would be another constraint that I would put. Now, we have added the ability, or we always had the ability to have and say, hey, specifically for replication, we check with the other side and say, is this block already there with you? In which case, we don't even send the blocks out, which is quite different than some of the other technologies where it does the dedupe here, but then, yes, I have dedupe, but I'm still sending it there, right?
Do a rehydrated replication.
Yeah. Exactly. There is a rehydration. And secondly, if both of us are replicating to a third site, you may have replicated the same block. I don't need to replicate that. Yes, you have deduped it. Even I have deduped it, but it still doesn't need to go there because you already sent a copy.
Because he's already deduped it.
Yes. So those kind of things are all taken care of as part of the platform, and you don't need to worry about multiple clusters sending on to the same site. And that is where I would pitch in our product Helios, which gives you a global view of the different clusters in your environment. And you can really see from Helios which sites are talking to which other sites, what are the different policies across the sites. Those kind of capabilities are always available. Right? And I'll finally touch upon one other aspect, which is our licensing. Our licensing is very simplified. So you get the product, you start to use it. We have 90 days of free trial for you to start using your product, and then you get what you want. And it's only after the 90th day that we say, hey, it's time for you to go enter the keys. But if you got the keys from us, and the keys are automatically installed from our Helios. So once you register with your cluster, based on the entitlements you purchased, the keys get automatically sent over to your cluster behind the scenes.
So that's all centrally managed through Helios rather than distributed across all of your clusters.
The entire process is simplified. You don't have to remember a 16-digit key or a 26-digit key, whatever be the key length is. All those things happen behind the scenes for you. Our goal is to ensure that once you get the platform, you can start using it right away.
Well, thank you very much, Anand, for joining me today.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about product.
Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more great content from the Build Day live event here at Cohesity.
Cluster heard you.
All right, just as that happened, we got it's speeding up there. So we do have a question on the chat from ETJNY. Is there support for MS Exchange and AD, granular backup, and restore? They are on 6.2 due to their VMware encrypted servers.
So we do have, I think the granular part of it I can follow up later, but we do have an integration for Exchange as well as Office 365 Exchange as well.
And you can hear that our upgrade is progressing. You've heard the whining of the fan. And if we take a look at the upgrade process, we'll see that, there we go, show tasks. We'll see one of the nodes has gone through. Lots and lots of detail of what it's been doing as it does the upgrade. Lots and lots. That's still the first node. And now moved on to the second node as the first one is completed out. I'm going to hide out the first node.
Yeah, a lot of our customers who've used Cohesity for more than a year and a half, some of the bigger enterprises, they have like 50 node clusters, 70 node clusters. When the LTS release 611D came out, within the week, basically, we were able to get about 800 clusters into the latest version. And that's possible only because we were actually able to do some of these upgrades during production hours while the system was being used and it was backing up, quite like what's happening here.
So as we've been doing that, the protection jobs have been completing. They're all three completed out at this stage while it's been doing. So the next thing we wanted to do was to start using a bit of cloud. We have a GCP storage that we're going to use. So how do I go about adding that to my environment?
Right. So again, focusing on a simplicity and one place to go to kind of change some of these data strategic settings. You want to first identify your target. So you will add the GCP object storage. So why don't we go to protection job and click on external target. All right. And we'll register this external target. And yeah, so you can do archival or tiering. I'll save tiering for a different conversation. But the idea is that we can connect to all of object storage. And this is primarily for long-term retention is what we're trying to do over here. We can connect to all of the commercial clouds that's out there, as well as if you have any NAS storage that you want to repurpose for long-term retention, we can, and we also have integration to tape. But the idea for long-term retention to cloud is that we're trying to give a flexible option for our customers to move off tape to cloud, right?
So in particular, a change from tape-based offsiting to network-delivered public cloud offsiting. So we're going to use GCP as regional, and I have the details kindly provided to me by Chris Colotti of the GCP bucket that we're going to connect to. So the bucket name is Build Day Live. Look at that, I've even put it in here already. Oh, the private key won't paste in for me. I better grab that then. Private key. Grab that and paste the entire private key, which gives me authentication.
Yep.
And then
actually, before you register, if you scroll down a little bit, Alistair, there's some more cool options here, right? So this is where if you want encryption at the object storage level or during flight, and if you want to make use of compression, source side deduplication, we can kind of enable that from a target perspective. But the things that customers use quite a bit is a bandwidth throttling. Typically, at the time of like a lot of customers either having a WAN connection or a direct connect, they want to be able to control how much data goes in and comes out. So you can actually set upload download speeds in terms of what kind of throttling speed that you want to send the data at over the wire, and if you want to do restores, what time and how you want to basically bring that down. And you can select it on a day-to-day basis and set time windows for these throttling to happen too.
And then I can also have multiple throttling windows with different settings as well in there. That looks extremely useful for you're paying for the bandwidth on these links, and you want to get as much business value out of them as you can. I'm not going to throttle the bandwidth. I'm going to let it go full out.
Yeah.
I got to name it.
Yeah.
GCP dash archive.
All right.
Great. So now I can go back to external targets and I can see it's there.
Right. And now basically we'll go back to the policy and say, you know what, apart from the local backups that we're doing to this within this policy, we can actually do long-term retention as well.
So I'll edit my policy here. This is the one that's backing up the domain controller that I'm sitting on. This is the one that's got the same retention, but I can add a archival presumably then.
Yep.
And say I want to archive to GCP archive every. I want to archive once a day, I think. And I could change the archival time. We're not going to be here for long enough to see that. And we'll do a.
Typically, the retention for your long-term retention, well, as the name suggests, right? It's going to be a pretty large number.
And so if it's financial data, it's going to be 7 years. If it's medical imaging data, it's going to be 120 years.
Exactly.
If you ever get stressed about working with financial data retention at 7 years, just think about the biomedical where you have to keep data for the entire patient's lifetime plus 20 years. So 120 years of retention it's a bigger problem.
And the idea is that, as a part of this policy, we're doing frequencies and all that, but also the data strategy around, when we actually send data to these archive targets, they're duped too. So apart from the first full that goes and sits in your object store, every other snapshots or increments that happen, there's only like a few changes that exchanges between your on-premise and your cloud object store.
So there's the amount of data being transferred is optimized all the way through.
Exactly.
So we'll save that guy out. And it says it'll change, right? We've got a policy applied to a particular machine and it's going to be affected. That's a nice notification. So now we have archive to GCP storage, a bucket. At this time, I'll just show you that bucket. The bucket here is currently completely empty. So this is our build day live bucket. Nothing currently in it. That's what we're archiving to here. I wonder if this node is the one that's currently being. No, we're on a virtual, so it won't be a single node that's.
Yeah, we'll give it a little time. It'll add this.
Let's take a look back at our cluster and see how we're going on the upgrade. So the upgrade is continuing along. It's saying we've got about another 8 of upgrade time. So the first node is done. Second node is still in. Oh, no, this node has gone through. So it looks like the second node is complete. That looks like a third node. So it looks like we're just finishing the third node, and the fourth node will kick off after that.
Yeah.
Modify policy is taking a little while to save out.
Yeah, unusual, but it should get done in time. One of the ideas that we kind of look at here is giving customers like a kind of a progressive step to cloud. So typically we start if customers are kind of cloud shy at this point and they have on-premise, but they're thinking of moving their data to the cloud. Long-term retention data would be the first start, right? Use them as sort of like a lazy DR strategy in case there is any unforeseen events that happen on your primary site. You have the ability to take your archive data and basically seed that to any other Cohesity cluster.
Right, and of course once it's in a Cohesity environment on the cloud, then it's all deduped globally, and as we start increasing our use, there isn't more data transfers as we change from one type to another necessarily.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, we're still not seeing that complete out. Is it likely to be destructive if I go and have a look at the policy and then re-edit it?
No, we can. You can probably refresh the page even.
Just refresh. Okay, so that archive hasn't been added. Let's just add it again, just to be sure.
Actually, it's probably in the middle of some upgrade task in doing this, so we can come back to this. If you actually go to the dashboard and probably see the protection policy, you might even see that being applied already.
So where are we going to see that?
And just go to policy manager. It might. Okay, it's still not taken in, so.
It's still not showing us that. Let me check that the external source is still showing up. So definitely the external source is still showing up. And we go and have a look at our policy manager again, and I will edit the silver policy again and re-add that archive if it's not showing.
This is the fun part of doing everything live, isn't it?
Yes, and it's exactly the sort of thing that happens in the real world as well.
Yeah. There we go.
That time it completed quickly, and now we've got an icon beside the protection policy saying that it's going to archive to cloud.
Yeah. So that's a cool thing, right? So you can actually have multiple archive targets too, and multiple replicated targets, and thanks to our engineers and our UI design, right? When we actually look at a policy, you already know what's happening with your data. It's doing local protection, it's doing archive to cloud. I can get that by just looking at this particular screen.
Right, and then what we wanted to do was actually make it happen. We don't want to wait another 12 hours since we've already had that protection policy applied. So I was going to run now.
Yeah, so the run now is a particularly interesting operation where it allows you to basically do a backup job right now or get a snapshot right now. It helps in scenarios where and all of what you're doing right now is API driven. And a lot of use cases that I have with my customers is like, oh, my DBA wants to run this backup at his time and hour, or he has this script to which I want to just give him an API and get him a Cohesity snapshot done. I typically basically point them to the browser, just do a backup now, copy paste the URL or API to the script, and they're up and running.
Right, and this could be even the operations team are about to make a significant change to a virtual machine, and we want to know that right now the machine has been protected beyond what's in the normal policy as well, because that's part of our backout plan, is to have a specifically timed protection point that we can use for our rollback.
Exactly.
But that doesn't then drive the replication and archive, because that's not changing my standard data governance. So I'm going to have to explicitly say I want to do an archive out to GCP.
Right. So what this will do is it'll do an incremental again on the local, so it gets the latest copy, and then it does a archive to cloud.
So if I have a look at this run, we've got the local backup task going on at the moment, and that'll have to do a scan for changes, so that'll be a non-zero time.
Yep.
And then we'll see this cloud archive task populate out as well.
And here's where a couple of scenarios that I've run with customers, and the questions they ask is, you know, if I have like 100 objects that I'm backing up, you know, does the archive happen when all the objects are backed up and then does an archive, or does it actually do on an object-to-object level? And the answer to that is, if you have 100 VMs that are locally backing up, as soon as the one copy of that VM gets done, it'll start doing a cloud archive. So allows us to be, you know, apart from having like an inherent parallel architecture, allows us to basically send data when we're to the cloud when we're ready as well.
So we don't have to complete each phase of backup archive separately.
Exactly.
All right. This is going to take some time to complete as well. And I think this is a really good time to bring in Sai Mukundan's video, please, Jeffrey, where he talks about the considerations for customers as they're adopting cloud. I think we'll see some of the parallels you see, that the first phase is that archive and use it as storage.
All right, here we go.
Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined for this video by Sai Mukundan. Sai, welcome, and could you introduce us to yourself and your role here at Cohesity?
Sure, Alistair. First of all, thanks for coming over to Cohesity and doing this event. We really appreciate it. So my name is Sai Mukundan. I am in the product management team here at Cohesity. Right,
and we've been talking a lot about the actual detail of what Cohesity does with the cloud, but I thought it would be nice to sort of step back a little bit and think about how Cohesity approaches public cloud as part of the portfolio and capabilities and those kinds of things. Can you talk us through a little bit about some of that approach?
Sure. So what we hear from customers, and we are primarily driven by what customers are telling the market is headed as well. Broadly speaking, three things in terms of what the customers are looking to do as far as the cloud is concerned. The first one is a number of customers are still in a hybrid world, in combination of both on-premises as well as trying to adopt the cloud. And so in that context, they're really looking at the cloud as a long-term destination for data that needs to be stored for relatively long periods of time. The second set of customers that we have really look to the cloud as an area where they can leverage it for disaster recovery. So the idea being that they still continue to have premise, and then the cloud becomes a destination in terms of bringing together some of the data on-premise data centers that they're eliminating and looking at the cloud as a DR angle. And the third set of customers, I would say, are really looking at cloud first and looking at developing applications that run in the cloud, including some of their mission critical ones. And as part of that, they're looking at the same goodness that Cohesity offers in the on-premise world, looking at the problem sets are very similar. So they're looking at similar things in the cloud context. So those are, broadly speaking, the three things that we hear from customers.
That last one must be very interesting, and one of the conversations I had in an earlier video was around that your compliance and data protection requirements are exactly the same if your data's in the cloud as if it's on premises, yet cloud providers don't necessarily have the services, the backup services and data protection that you require for that compliance. So presumably it's really important to be able to take the same policies from on-premises and apply them to your public cloud-based applications and data.
Yeah, you're right, Alistair, because what happens and what customers are beginning to realize is, for all the goodness of the cloud, the durability and the availability that they offer, they still want to have other vendors, other solutions that complement the portfolio from the services from the cloud vendors, and that's where the aspect of data protection that you mentioned comes in, particularly from a compliance angle. And I think one other aspect, a little bit, I would say, more futuristic or looking ahead, is the fact that many of these customers are also thinking about not just doing things in one cloud. They may start there, but potentially as time rolls along, we all know how important it is for anybody to have a multi-vendor strategy, just not just from a technical perspective, but more so even from a business perspective. And so when they think about it, they want to have a solution such as Cohesity that can work across different clouds as well, not just today, but going forward as well.
So that ability to, again, same data protection policies applied wherever we happen to place the application, that the ability to provide that data protection and governance doesn't constrict us on we can adopt for an application, because there's different clouds have different capabilities, they're not uniform, and so the ability to place your workload where the workload is best suited without that constraint is going to be important to customers.
Right. And what we have also seen is, as much as cloud itself is in general is relatively simple to sort of like turn on and start consuming, as you peel into it a little bit more, you get into a lot of the technology elements that customers have to understand, and they really grapple with some of these things because interfaces are different with different clouds. The APIs are similar, yet they are not exactly identical, right? So even if they sort of take a do-it-yourself approach, more often than not, they realize bringing this all together across various different environments is more challenging than probably what they start with, and that's where they're looking at solutions from other partners. And what you hit on is exactly right. A policy-based, API-first approach and architecture is really what customers are looking for.
And what are you seeing customers actually implementing in terms of using the data mobility? We've seen a couple of places in the other videos where data in one location, be it on-premises or one cloud, needs to be made available into another cloud or maybe back to on-premises. What's your experience with what customers are looking for here?
Yeah, so there are really two scenarios that customers typically do in terms of this data mobility piece. The first one is when we talked about earlier, from on-premise to the cloud. So they're looking at how can they do more with data protection solution, and that's where Cohesity really excels, because not only are we just a backup and recovery for their on-premise, but we are facilitating other things on top of the data mobility being just one example. And so the idea is, once it lands on Cohesity, the ability to take it and spin up those same applications in the cloud is something that we facilitate. So that's one scenario. The second scenario in terms of data mobility, I would say you could call it mobility, but really more about extracting value from the data, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch to say mobility, but extracting value from applications that can run on the data set. So more often than not, once the data lands on these systems, it tends to remain pretty dormant. But that's where we differentiate ourselves from Cohesity, because we can run other applications on top of that. We recently launched an app store with both homegrown applications as well as third-party applications that run on it. And so really uncovering more value from the data is what I am sort of bucketing in the mobility angle, where we are bringing those applications to the data as opposed to moving the data to another location, so to speak.
And what we've seen in that app store that we will have a look at in the live stream as well is the ability to do things like have your log data being put into a view on your Cohesity cluster and then using Splunk to do the analytics on that log data, or to have something like, I haven't looked at the detail of what the Amanus data solution looks like on here. Amanus backs up cloud native applications, so I can see that being really useful for people who are in hybrid cloud and need to do data protection on things like Cassandra databases. Get that into their unified data protection. I'm expecting that Cassandra is another backup product that's doing ingest onto Cohesity platform, so that very broad selection of applications on top. Yeah. Plus, of course, the analytics that is being progressively built out by Cohesity.
Yeah, that's right. So if you actually look at it, it's very similar to sort of the ecosystem that exists in the cloud, right? Because on the cloud, you can see that the cloud vendors themselves are, in addition to providing that, basic infrastructure, they have services of their own. They have applications that they are building, but there is an active and vibrant marketplace and ecosystem in the cloud for some of the things that the cloud vendors are doing themselves as well. So at the end of the day, really it's choice that the customer has, and depending on their needs, they can pick and choose, right? So that's sort of the parallel I can draw to the app store or the app ecosystem that we have. Is there are things that Cohesity is doing and will continue to do, and we'll obviously do a lot more with the data set that we have, but we don't claim to know every application out there or every other specific need a customer may have or an industry vertical may have, and that's where bringing these applications and enabling them to run our platform really uncovers the data set that we have.
So if I'm an existing Cohesity customer, what are my easiest first steps to integrating public cloud with my Cohesity implementation?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, we have seen, back to the three things that I mentioned earlier, we have seen those as a three really solid entry points
so using
for the customer.
Cloud storage as an infinite pool.
Yeah, so typically customers start with the storage as from an IaaS perspective in the cloud. So extending or leveraging that storage, the likes of S3 and blobs.
And that then lets me not have to use tape. And we've seen an interesting use case around how the recovery process went from 5 days to a couple of hours with the removal of that tape.
Exactly. So that's one. The second one is really the hybrid scenario that I mentioned, and I'm sort of bundling a few use cases in there, right? There's certainly DR. There's the aspect of taking applications on premise and potentially getting them to run in the cloud.
So both the failover because there's been a disaster on premises, right, but also the ability to run a dev test copy of production in the cloud for fidelity of testing of your new changes.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And then the last one is really the cloud native, so to speak. And cloud native can be a combination of both protecting their IaaS, their VMs and compute infrastructure, or it can be SaaS, such as Office 365 and those kind of applications. The third bucket is interesting actually because we launched a new service of our own called the Cloud Backup Service, and so that provides, and this is for Google Cloud at this point of time, and that provides a SaaS offering now from Cohesity to be able to consume this rich data protection solution in really a SaaS way. We are live in the Google Marketplace, and we have some really good examples of how fast a customer was able to just sign up for the service and then get up and running in literally a matter of 30 to 40 minutes. Right. So that's something that's really exciting in terms of what we have done and probably what we will look to do more of as well.
And so that's progressively deeper integration into the cloud platforms.
Correct. Yeah, this one's directly integrated, both from perspective in terms of how we work with the marketplace that the cloud vendors have, but more importantly also from a commercial standpoint, because customers are, when they consume the cloud, they're looking for ease of use, both from an operational standpoint, meaning technically, also from a payment and other billing standpoint.
Business interaction.
Exactly. So now everything is rolled up into their cloud bill, so to speak. And as far as the customers are concerned, there's just one vendor or one commercial vendor to deal with, and then things just seamlessly happen behind the scenes that are sort of like hidden from them, or the complexity is hidden from them. So that's really something that's exciting for us, as well as, more importantly, for customers we have talked to.
Well, thank you, Sai, on that note of innovation, for joining me today. And thank you for joining us on this video. Stay tuned for more great Build Day Live content from Cohesity.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be here.
So we've had the protection run, the manual backup has run, and that took 1 minute and 34 seconds to run the actual backup task. And our cloud archive task has begun. It is sending data across to Google now, and we're getting data being uploaded, but it looks like it's going to take a fair while to complete that upload, because we are contending now for the bandwidth out of the lab with the live stream, and hopefully the live stream is winning. But it does mean that the upload time is looking like a while. It'd be interesting to see if it does actually take 4 hours, or whether it's one of those forecast time doesn't necessarily match up. But we have that progress going on at the same time that we in admin, our upgrade process is still progressing. I guess actually the cluster view in here was one that let us see the nodes and what version they were currently on.
Yep.
So everything's showing 6.2.
Yep, we're done. Yeah.
So does the upgrade cluster show us that as well?
Mm-hmm.
Just see if it's showing. Yeah. So it says that current version is 6.2. We're at the point we wanted to. What was the next thing we're going to have a play with?
Maybe it might be time to take a look at our SaaS-based platform called Helios.
Excellent. That sounds like a good thing to have a look at. So if I remember from last time I was playing with Helios, it's here at helios.cohesity.com. And since I'm already logged into the support side, or I've already logged into Helios today, I can't quite work out how the co-authentication works. Here it is. So if you've watched my videos where I've been using the Cohesity platform and basically showing you walkthroughs of my process, so on my demitas.co.nz blog, I've been writing about using the Helios products for a while, and you'll have seen this environment. So this has my two clusters, the co-lab cluster, which is actually a virtual edition running on this in-the-room vSphere environment, as well as the co-cluster cluster, which is back home in New Zealand on my home lab. But now we need to turn on this new cluster that we've just built, the BDL cluster. Where do I go?
All right, so in essence, you want to go to your cluster that we've just built, and we want to basically enable Helios on this.
It's a bit of a refresh in here because we haven't got the Helios icon showing.
Yeah.
Log in again.
This is a post upgrade, right? So it's just restarted the services.
Agree to the license agreement for 6.2.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Right. So you should now, this is the latest version. You should see that H icon at the top right corner. You want to click on that, and you want to enable Helios, right? And click on just toggle the button to enable, and that should just be it.
Should then authenticate with the cluster. If I wasn't currently connected to Helios or support side, it will actually pop authentication for me. That's what I saw when I was doing this.
Yeah, that is
in my lab environment. And then that connecting to Helios, from what I recall, is there's a data transfer process that's going on at this point, and so some data starts to fill out in Helios. And
typically, it's a 443 port that it communicates through to get this part added.
So it's very firewall friendly for the perimeter. So if I come in here, my all clusters, it already shows build day live, BDL. Hasn't yet populated out all of the information.
We typically give it about, with all the data at least that needs to come in, we'll give our a few hours until the data gets populated.
Right.
So just a precursor to Helios itself, right? So one of the problems that we wanted to solve like 3 years back was to get customers to start consolidating these different silos, right? So there was a lot of fragment. There is still, but to a large extent, we're at a point where app management and global data management is the way to go for a lot of businesses. So the first thing you want to do is take your 60% of your infrastructure and put that under a single pane of glass, and that's what Cohesity is there to solve from that standpoint. But once we are there, suddenly things become very interesting because for the first time you have the data from a single pane of glass. So suddenly actionability of the data and what you can do with the data kind of exponentially increases, and that's where kind of Helios comes in around a multi-cluster management, around smart predictable analytics that you can get out of it, but also run apps where most of your data is, because that's where you'll get the value.
So I really like Helios for giving me the ability to see a unified view of my Cohesity clusters wherever they are. So I can come in and take a look at my CO cluster back in New Zealand, remote cluster. I can certainly see historic information about it. Right now Helios is showing us a few errors. I wonder if it'll happily talk to my CoLab cluster, which is here. So it's happy with CoLab. It's entirely possible there's an internet connection problem at my home that's driving that issue with seeing the co-cluster. And yeah, build day live still showing behind. So apps, what do we need to do for our apps?
So basically we want to go to our Cohesity cluster that we have built, and we want to enable applications.
We might have to wait a little while because it's not letting me see through here. It's not letting me see the build day live cluster.
Okay.
So how about we give it a little while to hit that? And one of the things that we've touched on is that the Cohesity platform is about consolidating data that's fragmented around the organization. Yesterday with Lynn Lucas about data fragmentation, the second of the two videos that I did with Lynn Lucas yesterday. And this is certainly a significant issue for customers that Cohesity is about addressing. So Jeffrey, if you're ready to play out that video for us while we wait for this cluster to come together, right? Welcome to Build Day Live here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined by Lynn Lucas. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Alistair. Welcome.
Thank you. Of course, Lynn is actually our host here at the location, even though I'm hosting her for this video.
But so happy to have you for the first time, right?
Yes.
In this location for
yes.
Cohesity, I should say. Yes.
And one of the things that's been a persistent theme and that I've written about and that Cohesity has been writing about is around of data being created within an organization for various business reasons, and that these are often separate copies, and you've got a special term for this.
We do, but it's so the term is mass data fragmentation. If I may, I would say that it's not just about the copies. I think many of us in this industry have heard about copies for quite some time. But beyond just copies, there's also fragmentation in a couple of other dimensions. So maybe it'd be good for us to talk about that.
Yeah, I think so. I'm talking about data that's gone sometimes beyond the boundaries of the organization and that needs to be protected as well. Things like cloud-hosted software as a service.
Absolutely, there is that. So as we have been talking to customers and understanding their challenges with data, I think certainly we can think about backup and all the copies that creates. However, it's one portion of a larger problem, which you've just touched on. Another one is the location aspect. copies being created in different locations, such as the public cloud or in a SaaS service. But then we also have the challenge of, let's take backup again, which unfortunately has typically been more of an insurance policy, and that copy of your database is not something you've been able to use, say, in your test dev or in an analytics environment. So you also have copies that are now stacking up in another silo in test dev and analytics in particular, because of the fact that you can't reuse what you're doing from a backup perspective. So those are the three areas that we would term that really create this mass data fragmentation challenge.
And so it would include things like taking a copy of my production database into a reporting. So from my online transaction processing database, making a reporting copy as a separate activity. Typically, this is a different organization, a different part of the organization solving their own problems.
Yes,
by reuse of data.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that, you know, a while ago, people, I think, felt like, oh, well, we'll be able to solve some of these challenges with just a what was called copy data management solution, but it's a much more pervasive problem. In some survey research that we've done, we've seen that organizations now find that the cloud has significantly exacerbated that problem because it's so easy to make more copies.
And you're only paying this month's bill.
Yes, and those bills, interestingly enough, in speaking with some C-level folks at various industries, those bills are coming in at the department level. And so in many cases, it's not necessarily visible at how much is being spent because much of this is done at a department level.
So even the billing is coming in fragmented, let alone the actual holding of the data.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Then presumably there's islands of data that are only usable for one department that might actually be useful across multiple. Exactly,
you're precisely right. And I think the business impact of this is just starting to be understood, but in some of the research that we've done, IT organizations have felt that they're probably wasting about 16 weeks on average per organization of time in creating and managing and dealing with all those copies. So 16 weeks, that's 4 months of the year.
That's a lot of time to be doing the necessary work before you can do the real work.
Exactly. Organizations, I think, are not looking to remove those folks, but hey, business is looking for more insights and value out of the data and the information systems that they have. But if folks are just moving and pushing data and re-provisioning systems or provisioning new systems for things they already have, then they're not getting to the business of the business. And that's a classic situation of IT being the department of no, we're too busy doing this other activity to get to the business valuable piece. Precisely. So some of the impact that we think Cohesity can have in this regard is, in our view, this is about first making sure that you have one platform for your data to collapse those silos. And we're talking about this, what we've termed secondary data, backups, but also some of the files, test dev, analytics, so that you have a global view and a global management structure of all that data. And that can create enormous savings of itself due to our unique deduplication and compression technologies. We've seen customers report up to 70% reduction just from the storage savings alone from bringing this all together with the technology that we apply. And we have a video with one of your customers who was talking about having had a 70 terabyte legacy requirement and bringing that, I don't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around 10 or 15 terabytes actually required when they migrated onto the Cohesity platform. And we have another video where I talk with Rawlinson about that global scope of the data efficiency, and that's a really nice story to not have to rehydrate the data anywhere, it remains on platform. That's right, yes. Now I think the other part is what we touched on, which is the people, right? And let's face it, folks, I think, want to serve the business, and it's hard to be the Department of No, and not fun, right? Who wants to be the Department of No? So when I've talked to customers, we have one customer, XO Communications, which is a subsidiary of major telecom, Verizon, here in the US, and they were in that cycle of having to basically look at adding full-time staff simply to manage the provisioning and backup and all of the operations around that for their increasing business in the public sector here in the US. They were planning before Cohesity to add several full-time equivalent staff to do that. Which sounds a little crazy, right? You got increasing business, and yeah, okay, we expect increasing staff, but just to manage backups, right? And the storage around that. And what they were able to do with Cohesity is now still actually invest in new staff, but that staff is productive in terms of doing other higher value requests for the business and not just managing operational procedures around backup or reprovisioning storage.
So not doing that necessary lower level work, having that automated and driven by rather than by sweat.
Exactly, and I think that's there's an intangible piece of that, you know, in terms of business value to the senior team, though, on, hey, what are the other higher level business objectives that we need IT to be serving, and how could they be focused on that instead of just the movement of infrastructure and data around our organization.
So that releasing of the human effort to do more higher value is a significant part. Well, thank you very much, Lynn, for joining me for this video. And thank you for viewing this video. There will be plenty more great content from Build Day Live here at Cohesity here on the channel. Welcome to the Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined by the Chief Technology Officer Global Field, Rawlinson Rivera.
Thank you for having me.
It's always great to have a chat with Rawlinson. I particularly wanted to have a sort of talk about how the data efficiency works on the Cohesity platform, because it's a really fundamental thing to making the Cohesity platform useful, is that data efficiency and not having to buy vast amounts of storage when you have to do all this data protection.
Well, you know, it's pretty incredible. There's some things that obviously haven't been done. When you think about storage system and distributed architectures, not all of them are able to or have been able to implement some of the things that we have here. So for example, one of the biggest things that we have as part of our platform is the ability to apply space efficiency features and capability at a global scale. So we are moving away from a single sort of like fault domain, say, system, and as our file system scales, so can the capabilities of spatially efficiently deduping or compressing that data. We could do that effectively whether the data is on one of our appliances, whether it be physical software implemented, cloud, virtual, doesn't matter. But you got to know that everything that we do, every data that leaves the platform, whether it be in a form of replication, being moved around, before it leaves, it's deduped and compressed, right? Globally. The larger the cluster you get, the more efficiency you'll get as in return. Not only do we do that on our own sort of implementation of our software, but we can deliver efficiency and value even when you have data stored directly in a cloud, per se, in an S3 bucket, in one of these sort of storage abstractions that are consumed, because we apply the same capabilities that we do on that particular data. So that makes it very, very cost efficient for people to actually kind of, you know, maintain data on this platform, because we deliver value not just in the simplification of the things that they're doing, but also in the sense of being able to, you know, to maintain and kind of store data efficiently in a much better way.
So to reiterate on that, you've got at cluster level, you're doing global deduplication across all of the nodes within the cluster, but then also at the multi-cluster federated view, where you've got Helios managing this replication between multiple clusters, that's still, the replication is still deduplicated and compressed, data efficient.
Correct.
And then when you're using an external storage as a destination for any of this, the data at rest in that external storage is again efficiently deduped, compressed, looked after all the way through.
Correct. So the thing is that, for example, with Helios, so like for example, when you mention federators, obviously we're keeping clusters that are different entities within themselves, right? So within those different clusters, that efficiency level is applied within. When you replicate data from one cluster to another, the data that's being replicated, obviously the initial ingest is a big one. Mm-hmm. After that, everything will be deduped and compressed. And also, we get to the point where we only send the change blocks across. So when you think about, in a multi-cloud world, not only the space efficiency that we're dealing with when the data is stored, but also sending data over and traversing. We actually introduced a way of cost savings there too, because that way you don't have to deal with the charges of moving data in that particular process. Obviously, the initial one is the big one, but after that, it's all space efficient, deduped and compressed from there on. And
then presumably, quite often clouds have a lot of egress charging for bandwidth, and that restore time coming back out of that cloud archive, I want the data transfer to be as deduped and compressed, as data efficient on that egress as possible.
Not only that, but look, when you're storing data or an application, in a lot of cases you tend to, when you archive a particular data set, whatever it is, if it's a multiple data sets, or if there are multiple applications, you have to basically restore the whole thing and take it back. We give you the ability to selectively choose what you want to restore in that particular point in time. We can catalog and tell you based on a calendar. We retrieve some of the metadata of the actual data or objects that we have protected, and you can actually individually choose and select which ones you want to download so that you actually can avoid that particular problem when it comes to a cost.
So that data efficiency across all of the layers, everywhere data is stored and in transit, is really important. It seems to have been a central design principle for the platform.
Absolutely. And another thing that we do actually that's worth mentioning is this. Data efficiency is one, being able to introduce that level of cost savings is one thing, but also data resiliency, and making sure that your data, if something goes wrong, doesn't get corrupted, messed up, or dies, right? In this particular case, we implement strict consistency across everything. So on the platform, whenever we do the commits and we apply, it's applied cluster-wide before we actually acknowledge. So if anything fails within the infrastructure, within one of our nodes or devices, because it will, things are meant to fail no matter what, right? Your data is not ever at risk in a particular case. So that's another additional factor of what we do with data, how we kind of manage and deal with it effectively in another way.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rawlinson, for joining us, and thank you for joining us for this Build Day Live at Cohesity video. Stay tuned for more great content from Cohesity. And it's always good to talk with Rawlinson. Often catch up with him at conferences as we travel around. Now that we've got the slow internet connection, or congested internet connection here, seems to have synchronized down, and so we can pop in and we can see our Build Day Live cluster is now populated up here in the Helios portal. As we were watching for it to happen, one of the things we did look at quite a lot was coming in here in the platform and clusters view to see the status of the clusters that are connected, and that's a nice different summary that shows us the versions that we have out there and capacity kind of information.
Yeah, and that's I guess we live in a world where businesses are no longer local. It's kind of a global infrastructure. So having that single pane of glass that gives you insight into all of your different clusters all across the world. Just from an infrastructure standpoint, and just barely on what version of code they're running and stuff like that. That's the sort of single pane of glass, multi-cluster management that we bring in.
And I could, for instance, come in and connect to my lab cluster in here, and I could run the upgrade out of Helios on that. Won't do that right now. It's a single node virtual edition, and it'll go out of service while that upgrade occurs.
Yeah.
But the thing we were talking about before was getting the applications running on the Cohesity cluster, actually bring the applications to the data. So how am I going to turn that all on?
All right. So what we're going to do is we need to first, from a security standpoint, enable that from that cluster itself. So we want to connect to the BDL cluster that we have built.
All clusters doesn't have a platform view. Let's go back to BDL.
All right, and we want to go to the cluster settings, and we want to enable applications. So if you just scroll down a little bit.
We're in Helios.
Yeah, we're in Helios. So we need to do that from our
the cluster itself.
The cluster connectivity, right? Yeah, we go to cluster settings, and then we scroll down, and you see that toggle button that says enable app management. Yes, we do that. And
so this is an internal subnet that's used by the apps.
Yes, it's our natting network inside of our system that we need to basically set.
So a fairly large network, but it's not externally routable.
Yeah.
It's entirely inside the Cohesity cluster. Probably should be something that's reserved out of your IP address schema, so you don't end up with routing issues across it.
Exactly. And yeah, this is just a UI. So you just put in your email address there.
Not my actual email address.
All right, sweet. Right. So now, if we actually go back to our Helios console, we can basically go to apps now, and probably want to just refresh.
I think I need to be at all clusters level. There we go. I needed to be at all clusters level to see apps.
All right. So, what apps would you like to see, Alistair?
All the apps, all of the time, please. The one that we'd certainly see the most talk about is Splunk.
Yeah.
So that's the ability to then look and run some analytics across the data that we have sitting on our Cohesity data platform. It kind of seems like the most natural synergy is that Splunk says we can make sense of whatever data you send us. Exactly. And here we have all of our data.
Yeah. So we are that consolidated platform, and the fit is pretty straightforward, right? You want to basically run Splunk as a small container on us, basically. So this allows us to get into this app management piece now. So you can actually come to apps, and you can just say install application.
So we'll install app Splunk,
and you can actually choose the cluster on where you want to
VDL cluster, because that's the only one that's sufficiently up to date. My other two clusters are running an older version. Mm-hmm. And so don't support this. And so the app will be installed on the cluster. Can we watch that anywhere else?
So you should be able to actually see that on the cluster itself.
So if we come back onto the cluster, oh, it says it's ready to run the app. So on the cluster summary, if I pop into the apps on the cluster.
Mm-hmm. So you basically get a version that's installed. And what you do is create an instance of the Splunk next. So you can do that at the cluster level. It's pulled it down.
Install app option here is the same as up here in Cohesity to run the app?
Yeah.
Or install to cluster. Let's push it to the cluster from here. No, I can't. I've already installed it to the one cluster, so I now need to come down onto the cluster.
You can actually run the app from the Helios UI itself.
Right. And away it goes installing. Now, if I remember correctly, this is where it's going to grab the entire Splunk, and these apps are running as containers with. You don't need to know this to use it, but the underlying infrastructure is containers and Kubernetes, and so there's a bit of image download at this stage, which is also going to take a little while. So once again, we should hit to a video, and I think maybe Mike Letchin, who did a view migration, so we're going to see that we need a view for this data. And Mike Letchin did a video with me yesterday about making views available in other locations, maybe somewhere where you have excess resource to do that in analytics. So Jeffrey, would you like to play up Michael for us?
Sure.
Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. I'm Alistair Cook, and I'm joined by the very community-engaged Michael Letchin. What's your role here with Cohesity, Michael?
So I'm one of the principal technologists with the technical advocacy group here at Cohesity, so with quite a few of the other guys. Again, very community-based
group of people, yeah. And what are we going to take a look at in this video?
So today, I think we're going to dig into how to do replication from an on-prem Cohesity appliance out to any of the cloud editions. So whether we're looking at Azure, GCP, or AWS, today we're going to use Azure just because it's the one I picked.
And because of your background in shared file system, you've chosen to do this with a file share rather than a bunch of virtual
I'm going to do a
machines.
view. Plus, really, if you're putting it out there and in all reality, to demo it, I can connect to a view real easy. I don't have vCenter sitting in Azure, so it's a little bit harder at that point.
Right. All right, let's take on.
So, okay, I'll go ahead and jump over to our dashboard here. So right here, you're looking at the standard Cohesity dashboard. This on-prem box, COH01, but then I've also got an AWS and Azure, as well as a GCP Cloud Edition here. Now, normally I would say we could kind of jump between them, but first thing I want to show you is going over to the Windows Explorer. I've got my current one. This is my on-prem that I'm looking at. Quite a few file shares here. Obviously, I'm going to use this certbot storage. Just happens to be a random view that I've got sitting out there. But if I go to the Azure that I've already connected to, nothing. So nice and empty. So we'll see the entire process.
And these are both file shares off Cohesity clusters in the two different
Correct.
locations.
So this COH01 is that on-prem, and then AZ-COH is Azure COH. So I'm going to go back over to the management console, and I'm going to go ahead and create a protection job. I'm going to use that view we talked about, and I'm just going to do demo cert. I'll select a view that I want, that certbot store that we talked about. And now I'm going to take one of our policies. I'm going to use this one, already has replication set, but we'll edit it just so we can see what that looks like. First thing we do is scroll down for that replication, and I can see I'm replicating out to Azure COH. I'm going to run that at every run, stay for 90 days. That really doesn't necessarily matter right now, obviously, for the demo, but you can set that to be configurable as you wish. So I'll leave that as is and go ahead and just tell it to protect it. Now, right away, if I jump over to protection jobs, I'll be able to find that demo cert job that we just created. It's going to actually be on, oops, I missed it. It's on page 1. There it is right there. Nice thing is it's actually already ran. So now if I jump over to that Azure, now I want to go look at my views. Certbot store wasn't there at all. Right now it's just set as a DR view. But I obviously need to be able to do something to it. Right now, if I go back over, I can't see it. And on initial replication, you're not going to see it. So the first thing you have to do is actually go into that and do a clone of the actual space. So I'm going to clone to a local target. So I'm cloning the replica that came from on-prem to Azure, and I'm just cloning that into a new clone view of that certbot.
So this is restoring, essentially,
Correct.
a backup
it's
of my
basically
on-premises.
just activating that replicated snapshot. Yeah. So that replicated snapshot that's in there, it's ready, but you don't necessarily want to see it right away. Like, yeah, you want replicating, but I'm not using it. There's no reason to activate it. And I don't want somebody to potentially go in and mess up that replica. So I don't want to share it right away. So I've now shared it. The nice thing is, because you have a DR view, when I clone it, I can actually create the same name and keep consistent names. So by default, we add copy because most people want to see something, but you could keep the same name to keep it consistent. Now when I say, I'm going to just say continue. Oops. Have to create the QoS policy first here. That's just anything that you're doing on it. Now that's created. So if I go, I've got this new view now created. I had just the DR view. Now I have search store copy. Before I can do anything with it, another thing that we kind of make sure doesn't get shown right away is we don't want to make that browsable right away. So just in case you replicate it, you had it there, but I don't want everyone looking at it. But for demo purposes, obviously I need to be able to browse it.
But you could leave it out of the browse list and give somebody the actual connection.
If someone knows exactly where they're going now, or maybe I only want to present that they can get to it via, say, S3. Right. I don't want it SMB browsable to get to it and don't want somebody messing with that replica. So I'm going to update the view and make it browsable. So now I can come back over to this guy and refresh it, back over to my Azure cluster. There it is. And there's all my data. So it's already replicated out. Obviously, it's not a real big space, so we got some speed out of that. But it's replicated. I can now do whatever I want to this. Anything I do to this will not impact my on-prem either. So I can utilize this for things like testing and analysis without impacting my production workload that possibly could be running on my main site.
In Azure, I've got a point-in-time copy of what was on-prem being presented out, and I could choose that point in time if I had multiple of those protection job runs.
Exactly. I could pick where I want to do that. Obviously, we only had the one, so that's why I had to go with. But I could go ahead and clone that and get a copy of it whenever I want.
And this will be good for integrating into your application that's doing periodic reporting or dev test
It could be reporting. It could be things that maybe you're looking at migrating something into a cloud environment. So if you've got, say, an EC2 machine that is doing something else, some analysis, and you just need to get it some data. You've got your data set on-prem. In all reality, maybe your data set is on Azure, and you're going to an AWS box. All that data was collected over there. You need to move it, replicate it, clone it, and now that AWS machine can analyze that data you collected on Azure. Right. So it gives you true multi-cloud capability.
Mobility of your data, which is always a big challenge in multi-cloud.
Exactly. So that's how you get the replica done.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for joining us.
Of course.
And thank you for joining us for this video. Stay tuned for more great Build Day Live content here at Cohesity. Well, while I was talking with Mike yesterday, at least while you were watching me talk with Mike yesterday, the install of the Splunk application onto the cluster has completed. So what's my next task for us?
So so one of the things that Cohesity does is we can basically expose our data stores, what we call as views, as NFS, SMB, or S3. So we need to basically let the Splunk run on a view. So we need to create a view. So let's go ahead and do that first before we actually run the Splunk app on that. So you go to Platform. Views, yeah. And we want to create a view. First, they will give it a view name. Call this the Splunk data.
Look, I've called it Splunk data before. On our default storage domain, so this sits alongside all of the other storage in that storage domain.
Yeah, at least we recommend that you do. And these are some of the options that you get. You can actually expose this simultaneously as an NFS and an SMB target for data for a mount point for the data ingest to happen, right? So you can choose how you want your view to be.
We'll allow everything.
All right. And then security, obviously. So we can actually, there is a overriding global whitelist that we'll set that will determine which clients can connect to this particular view, right? So we can do that at the, we will need like an umbrella that, and then you can kind of set up some more granular access control from here.
Okay. So I'll just turn that on, create that view.
All right. So that's about it. So what we want to also do is just set up a global whitelist so that your, if we're not necessarily required for here, but we set that up just to make sure that the any clients accessing it has access to it.
So what this looks like, it's here, and I can add a net mask. So I'm going to add my lab network. 192.168.199.0. Subnet mask is 255. 255.
You got an extra 5 in there. The first
yeah. Yeah. This is why we like CIDR ranges, where I just put a /24 in, and I add that.
And now we should be able to basically go to our apps and run the Splunk app.
How about if I take a look and see if I can see this share?
Oh, sweet.
2.168.62 is one of our, there's my Splunk data share. Right,
so that's what customers kind of like that, like this flexibility of this feature. Apart from having a slew of data protection features, we can also expose this as a share.
So I'm going to grab some files that I created earlier, copy those, paste them into this view. And so it's just a file share that I can put files into now. Cool.
And then it's as simple as going to the apps, and we can actually create an instance out of that Splunk by saying run app. And you basically get, if you actually go, the QoS policy we don't really need to change, but basically if you go down to read permissions, you can say specified views. And there you go, your Splunk data views here.
So it's not going to be giving carte blanche global access to all of my data. It's this particular set of data you have. And it's read-only access in there as well, so it's not going to be able to modify anything.
There we go.
It's good.
So we can add a description as we like, and Splunk. And then you can just say run app. So yeah, sometimes you know, I think you know 2 clicks kind of went in when you click that. So
okay,
probably that's happened.
So if we then come back into apps, we should see that there's maybe a running instance.
Go to all instances. Okay.
No, it hasn't seen that run. Maybe I was just holding my mouth wrong while I was doing it. We'll try that again. Specified views, allow Splunk data. And I'm not going to add a description this time and see. That time I was happier.
Things about doing live.
Live demos are the most terrifying thing you can possibly do. No matter how many times you practice it, something doesn't necessarily go exactly as it did last time you practiced.
Yep. So it is running. I mean, you get a warning saying some components might not fully be up, so it's probably doing some kind of a restart of service.
Still doing startups.
Yeah. So that should kind of clear out pretty soon.
There we go.
And then you can open app.
Open app, and it's not ready yet. Still.
Yeah.
We'll leave that for a moment too longer to see how it's going. Let's pop back into the main Cohesity cluster and the main Helios cluster and just make sure everything's happy in our environments. I'm just noticing I've got a critical error showing up in here, so I'm a little interested in what's going on with critical. So my cluster at home has a critical error. So if I take a quick look and see if we can talk to him successfully now. It doesn't want to talk to my cluster at home. The critical error may be that my cluster is offline.
That's your cluster in New Zealand?
Yes, that's the one in New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
We've been away for a week now, so it may not be happy. Let's take another look and see. Oh, Splunk.
There we go. Yeah.
Remember what that password was?
Yeah, it's a. I can type it in for you if you want.
Go ahead and type
I have
in
better muscle memory on this one. There we go.
And so now I've got, let's not save that password. So now I've got Splunk running on my Cohesity cluster. I've not needed to deploy any additional infrastructure beyond Cohesity in order to get Splunk analytics.
Yep. Well, it was easy.
That seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so what have we done so far? We've deployed a cluster from scratch. We've configured it to protect a bunch of virtual machines by tags and by folders and by specifically selecting virtual machines. We've added archiving out to object storage, in this case on Google, but that's not the only platform that's supported for object storage. We've attached to, we've done an upgrade. We've done an upgrade from the current long-term support to a feature release. That feature release was what was required before we could do apps.
Correct.
And then we've done those apps.
Wow, that's quite a bit of things we've done already.
That's quite a lot of things in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I guess, though, that I don't really think the protecting data is the end for us, though.
Yeah, we want to be able to recover it.
So let's leave this copy of Splunk alone, and let's accidentally delete some things. So that data folder that I just copied things around, that's got some files in it. So I'm just going to accidentally delete some manuals out of here that I might maybe want to get back again.
And remember, I guess this virtual machine is being protected, right?
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
Yes, this virtual machine is specifically being protected. So if we pop into the protection jobs, we have this virtual machine is called DC, and we have a job for DC. And we did that successful backup. And it hasn't yet run a scheduled archive to GCP. Actually, let's take a look if that archive to GCP that we ran manually has completed, or whether it still says it's going to take 4 hours.
Yeah, it's still contending for some shares on the
bandwidth limited somewhere. Okay, but we have local protection for it. So I now need to get those files back. I think I was a little silly having deleted some vitally important manuals out of the folder.
Right. So the way we look at recovery with Cohesity and the beauty of what Mohit and engineers have built is giving customers different granularities of options for recovery, right? So that could be it could be your decision-making CEO saying, I want that PDF right now, send it to me an email when things have gone down. So you need to be able to kind of be tactical in that way, but also give you the larger granularity of, bringing 30 virtual machines online instantly. So our goal with Cohesity is to having the latitude for you to achieve both these targets. So let's maybe start from something small and then start to go with bigger data sets for the viewing audience.
Shall we recover those two files that I just deleted by accident?
Why don't we just search for it?
Okay.
So you do recover files and folders, and
I think Sennheiser was
there it is.
There it is. There's a file that I want to bring back. We've only got one recovery point in here because we've only done one.
The second one is still in progress since
right.
It's going the archive targets.
So I have to wait for the entire protection run to complete before I can recover.
But ideally, if you were to have this in the local and archive and your replicated sites, then it would indicate that this particular snapshot taken at this particular time would be available across the targets noted by those icons.
Targets being local.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this gives you the option that you wanted to, recover in. And for single files, usually you want to download and, probably send that as an email.
I actually want this one. I want to recover in place.
Let's do that.
So we'll recover the server on that one. And it says here's the recovery task. This is what I'm recovering from this particular time, and I could choose a different time here. I need to connect to the domain controller. Okay. That is administrator, and the password is that one. Recover to original, overwrite. Let's not overwrite any existing file because, well, we don't want to. And just recover files.
Yep.
That looks pretty simple.
Yeah, so it should basically, so again, this is the power of Cohesity, of the ability to do NFS SMB S3 out of our storage box, right? So you should see that mount point come up on your box with that file being recovered pretty soon.
So will I see a mount point up for this because I said recover?
Actually,
we'll go the other direction.
Yeah, it just goes to wherever it came from.
It'll be connecting to the admin $C share and putting data back, presumably. Go to recovery. How are we doing? 15% complete. So let's watch that fault. There's my file come back. And now I can open up the manuals for the wireless microphones that I've got in my hand. So that looks good.
Nice.
But I might also want to recover a single file in a different mechanism. So I also had there we go, the manual for my servers in the lab that I want to restore. So this time I'll go for a download.
Yeah, so this is typically where you want to download and send that as an email to someone asking for it.
Files immediately here in my downloaded items and the manual for that was frighteningly fast. So I immediately have now in my downloaded items that file is straight back. I'm amazed how fast that is. I haven't actually done that download recovery before. That's very cool if you've got an executive who is leaning on your shoulder and saying, I need that report, not the version that I saved last night because I was doing something silly. I need yesterday's version.
Yeah, so that flexibility is kind of appreciated from the folks who are using us in this scheme.
What's my next scale of granularity?
Let's go up the order now. Let's say you want to do a single virtual machine restore.
Okay. Well, let me log in and delete a virtual machine so we can restore it over place. So I might have accidentally deleted a virtual machine. If you're hearing a little bit of noises, it seems like there's some deliveries to the floor above us, and so there's a bit of rattling of equipment. So I'm going to take this launcher 01 because it's top of the list, and I'm just going to power him off, and then I'm going to delete him from disk. Kind of aggressively remove things. Delete from disk. Yes. So now launcher 1 is all gone. And let's see if I can bring back launcher 01. Recover VM.
And search for your asset. So
launcher 01. There he is in the list. I will continue on with him. I'm not going to rename him. I'm going to bring him back to his original location. I'm going to keep the networking and start because it's replacing the existing.
and you want to probably turn the power
Turn off,
option.
powered off. That's an interesting semantic choice. Right, let's go do it. Finish.
All right.
Task is running, and I guess I'm going to see progress in here, but I'm also interested in the progress at the vSphere layer.
You might actually see the VM already present now.
Or this VM here.
It's back.
So he's already back, already powering on.
Yeah.
And if I show all tasks rather than just the running tasks, and I'll make this a little larger so we can see the tasks. We've got our power on completed. That's the one that I wanted to see, was the create NAS data store task.
Right, so how that recovery process works is as soon as you click that recover button, we basically did an instantaneous mount of an NFS data store onto that ESX host. And then we basically registered that machine coming from Cohesity, right? And then once we powered it on, it's already usable. So while the user is using the machine, we can basically at the back do a storage vMotion to where it came from a primary storage standpoint.
Right, so there's this Cohesity int 42. I didn't clean up a couple of data stores from earlier restores. I should really clean those up.
So yeah, so that's something that I definitely show in my demo, that instantaneous virtual machine recovery.
Yeah, and so we have this machine is now launch a console on it. We'll see a running Windows instance in a moment as soon as the console connects. Yeah. So we can see that we can log onto this launcher machine now. It's connected. Yeah, straight away available. Has that task to migrate finished? If I just switch to running tasks. So the migrate is still in progress. It's still in the flight. The Cohesity data store and the vSAN data store.
Yep.
Nice. So that's a single machine recovery, and it's going to take about another minute or so to complete that recovery. Cool.
Well, the next step is to go bigger, right?
Go big or go home.
So yeah, that again. So all of this is part of our platform goodness that our engineers have built, and this is again one of the value propositions of Cohesity's where we do really well is in instant mass restores.
So I'm going to take this bunch of virtual machines here.
Wow, Alistair, you're a brave man.
It's only some Windows machines. They're backed up. They're protected. Power the whole lot off. And delete all 10 virtual machines from disk. Yep. Cool, they're all gone. That's freed up some space. I'm not sure if I want them back.
Is there any way to protect it so if somebody does delete it that say, hey, you know, this is meant to stay around?
So at the vSphere layer, we would use security permissions to make sure that it was an authorized person doing the delete.
Yep.
That's definitely a vSphere issue rather than a Cohesity issue to protect you. And good security design would be very important there.
But we do have, looking at it from like a corollary of it is, we do have like self-access portal capabilities for users having the ability to access the data that they're supposed to recover from. And then we have integrations with things like ServiceNow, so you can basically send an approval ticket saying, you know what, this user requested the recovery of this VM so that if it goes through some kind of a management change for that approval workflow to happen. So, and we can kind of tie this up to an automation or tie it up with an integration to a tool like ServiceNow.
Okay. Now I've deleted all of those Windows machines. I'd better restore some files again.
Yeah.
And this time I'm just going to search by gold, because that was everything that was in my gold folder-based protection.
Yeah.
And so I'm just select the entire protection job.
Yep. And
that's cool.
Yeah, this is and from if you just kind of look underneath the covers, this is the goodness of our snap tree, and this is the secret sauce of Cohesity in terms of how good we are in terms of how we store these snapshots in our advanced B plus tree mechanism, as well as the ability to take to do these hydrated restores and do it parallelly because we are a distributed architecture. So all of this sort of in a lot of the other legacy systems, there's some amount of centralization in the architecture. So the bottlenecks of doing like a mass restore of 30 virtual machines is caught up at a different point in your network schema. For us, the fact that we're distributed, the fact that we can, we have an efficient way we store our metadata, and the fact that it's hydrated, we can basically bring this up instantly. So hopefully
let's see how instantly we actually get usable machines. So again, I'm going to keep the name. I could come in here and choose to rename, adding a prefix to the virtual machine name. If I wasn't from an actual failure, if I wanted a copy deployed somewhere, that's that kind of function that I'd use. Still network attached, we're going to power these machines on and get them back as soon as possible. And I could choose what recovery point to bring them back from as well, although again, I only have one here.
That'll give you a time-wise snapshots that you want to choose from. Yeah.
So we can finish that out. And there it goes running again. What does vSphere see at this point? Oh, we've got machines going on. So vSphere is seeing at least the first machine registered. And yeah, more machines being registered as we go. So that's progressing along. And virtual machine startup has begun. And the main thing that's being slow in this is probably, in fact, my console, being able to see these changes, these updates occurring. So if I refresh the view in here, we'll probably see even more has progressed.
So yeah, that's the beauty of we call this IMR, Instant Mass Restore, around here. So,
and I'll pop up a console on this machine, and at the moment, this particular virtual machine is stored mostly on the Cohesity cluster, and it's in flight back to the vSAN cluster. And what we'll see is the restore time on this is limited by the fact that I have a 2-node vSAN cluster that is being fed by a 4-node Cohesity cluster. And there's a bit of a mismatch that my little cluster is going to be the limiting factor in here. But we should shortly see an operating system, a login prompt in here.
There we go.
There we go. There's a login prompt, and pretty quickly, while it's still in flight, I can hit the login button, and of course Windows is lying when it says it's ready to log in, but not too long after. I can log in with my domain credentials because it's on the network, and we should see a Windows desktop fairly shortly. So the key point for me in that is that I don't have to wait for the storage relocation to get access to the applications running in the virtual machine.
Correct.
They're immediately accessible to me, and presumably we're using quite a lot of the, if there's writes going on, they're going to the solid state in the Cohesity appliance, so we're not being limited by the spinning disk, which is good for throughput, but not necessarily good for transactions.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And there we go, we've got a Windows desktop up at about the same speed as the Windows desktop normally comes up inside these virtual machines. So that absolutely usable while it's in flight, and the recoveries are underway, but looks like they're going to take some minutes.
The extent, I mean, the status is not just the power on, but the status is recovered to your primary data store as well. So,
right, so the recovery task, because that storage relocation happened immediately, and I didn't have to do anything else to move the running VMs. That was all part of the recovery. Okay, well, while that recovery is in progress, that's probably a good time to look at another video. Who have we had on and who have we not seen yet? How about we, we've seen Mike. Shall we have Lynn Lucas with the puppies story with a really nice tape replacement story from a customer?
A little bit about LTO, yeah, absolutely. So here we go. Wait, what? There we go. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. It's a great pleasure to be joined by Lynn Lucas. Welcome, Lynn. And would you just quickly introduce yourself to what your role is here at Cohesity?
Oh, absolutely. Happy to have you here, and I am pleased to lead marketing here at Cohesity. Having a great time here since last January, helping our customers solve mass data fragmentation.
We'll look at mass data in another video, but you had a really interesting story about it was a gentleman you were sitting next to at dinner.
Yeah.
That was a customer that had a really fun story about how they're using Cohesity to completely change the way they operate.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me talk a little bit about that. Our customer Airbud, who's in the media and entertainment industry in Canada, very popular set of films if you have children, as I do, about animals, dogs, and they had a struggle with, I think, what a lot of our customers do, which is tape and archive and the slowness of finding material. And so I was really fascinated to hear how they had transformed that process with Cohesity. So imagine getting a request in from the creative team, and they're looking for a piece of footage from a last film for the next film. And really what struck me is this process was quite lengthy. So having to leave the building to go to where the tapes are stored, of course, but then bringing them back, having only 2 machines running through, tens of tapes potentially, 2 hours a piece, and not knowing where that piece of footage or those pieces are. And what was described was between the time of an ask, on average, probably 4 to 5 full business days before IT could provide that right piece of creative and footage that they were looking for.
So the artist has this idea in mind to reuse some content on the project they're working on and has to wait 5 days before that content's in front of them to actually operate on it.
Yeah.
And that was all driven by the fact that it was tape-based and doesn't sound like it was very well indexed data on those tapes in order to retrieve. So what does it look like now that the customer's got a Cohesity platform out there?
So one of the things that they wanted to do, because as you said, 5 days is kind of be an eternity now in business, is make this a much more agile process. So they have moved their archives to Amazon and also moved over to Cohesity. And in doing so, now have the ability to do global search. So now, instead of getting this request, leaving maybe at 5 p.m., driving down to the facility that's storing the tapes, the gentleman can start right at desk, do a global search on his Cohesity Helios dashboard, and is able to typically process the request in the same day for that creative services team due to our global search capabilities and having that indexing and the material much more accessible in Amazon.
So one of the elements is the replacement of tape, which is a sequential access media, with cloud-based object storage, which gets you your archives off-site, so it complies with your data protection for that highly durable off-site. And the other is the importance of having a local index of what's actually out there to be able to do that search.
And I would add to that one of the unique factors of Cohesity, which is searching globally across the cloud. And in this case, the gentleman is also using Cohesity for some of their on-premise data protection backup requirements. And Cohesity having the ability not just to search the metadata, but if we take this case and make it more generally applicable, because so many organizations today have e-discovery or some type of compliance request, Cohesity having the ability to actually search the data within the files as well. So really helping the IT team speed these types of requests that can come from other members of the IT department or perhaps other business units.
And I think that's where we see those more universally applicable, although we're not all media companies that are producing whole feature-length films. We often do find we have large sets of data, and access to the actual archive copies is problematic. It's a common business problem.
Absolutely. I don't myself know of any industry today that isn't subject to some type of regulation for which businesses is looking to make sure that they're compliant to that personal information. You know, if you're based in many countries, you are subject, or many businesses are subject to this new GDPR regulation. Yes. And there's always been a lot of regulations outside of that on personal information. And so this, I think, is very generally applicable.
Well, thank you, Lynn. It's a really, I think, enlightening example of deployment with Cohesity.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this Build Day Live video at Cohesity. Stay tuned for yet more videos. All good stuff here from Cohesity. Well, our instant mass restore has been instantly service returned, but it's still going to be a little while before the virtual machines come up. So how about we protect some other kind of data?
I did hear in the early part of the call that's around Office 365. Maybe you can take a look at that.
Sure.
Right.
Where do I go?
So one of the things that the whole setup and configuration piece of something like Office 365 is fairly simple with Cohesity. So we basically, while we won't waste time showing you some of the Exchange options, in essence, you have about 5 permissions that you need to enable on a Cohesity account there. And all you need to do, like how we did, like adding a source, adding a VMware source and adding some of the other external target as a source, go to sources and we'll basically register an Office 365 admin account. And that's all you need to do to basically get your integration done. So do you, you already do.
As it happens, I do have a Office 365 account that I can manage. I just have to remember my password.
Yep. And the
Let's
idea,
see if I got it right.
And the idea is simplicity of integration here. So yeah, there we go. Your Office 365 is registered. So it typically takes me, and I actually timed the whole operation process of going to Exchange, adding some of these permissions, then coming to Cohesity and adding the account. And it's very, very easy.
So if you need some reference on adding those permissions, Chris Colotti wrote up that process on the Cohesity blog early this year, I think it was. Or I've done a video on that as well.
Yeah, you've got a blog too on this one, right? Right. So by now you should be fairly, aware of the process, right? It's we have the policy. All we need to do is create a protection job for your Office 365 account, right? So
protect Office 365.
We'll give it a name.
Outlook. Why not?
And choose your box. And here's where you basically get, this is your admin account, so you basically get all the associated email accounts with it.
I'm going to protect all of our Outlook environment, and I'm going to auto-protect if Demitas, my personal company, gets really huge and I have to employ 15 more people. I'd like those protected as well.
Right, and then add. And again, the idea of that one-time set policy is do you want to reuse that policy? Do you want this data to basically be, or do you want the data to be long-time archived to a cloud object store as well? So you have the ability to sort of switch on that.
So it's very much the same settings that we have on any of the other protection jobs.
Yep.
It's just that it's a different source type.
And then it's protect. Yeah, that's it. So this should start.
Once again, the job will start up as soon as the schedule engine inside the Cohesity platform sees that it's not compliant with the policy.
And again, so right now it'll basically be pulling out the first copy of that mailboxes and stuff via internet. So we'll see how long it takes.
I imagine that also will take some time. There we go. It has begun, and it is running in parallel. The backups of the two mailboxes, mine and Tracy's.
And I guess one of the points that I want to sort of bring to picture is we do a lot of parallel ingests. Now we dealt with VMware workloads, we dealt with like Office 365 now, but this parallel architecture applies to your SQL workloads and Oracle workloads as well. The way we work is at the point of time of ingest, all of the data gets basically sprayed across all of the nodes. We actually have our underlying file system is strictly consistent, so we make sure that we have a solid copy of the data in our hard drive before we basically acknowledge that data has been written or not, and that comes up in scenarios during failure.
Yes, yeah. If you have a node failure in the middle of a backup, you need to be absolutely certain that your data has been written to multiple locations. It's not good enough to be in cache; it needs to be out in persistent locations on multiple nodes.
And that's a very important criteria for the resiliency of the platform, and we score really well in it. And I welcome this as a part of like a POC test plan where when a backup is happening, I would go at the back, pull out a node. And in a lot of other scenarios, what happens is the SLA gets reset. So if you're doing like a 16 terabyte backup of a VM or a large mailbox, and suddenly you basically have, it's either the job fails because of a node failure or the whole SLA goes back to 0 and you're backing up the entire thing.
Right.
And that's the problem with some of the eventual consistent models, right? For us, at worst, you will lose that, 200 megabytes or 250 megabytes per second that one node is giving you,
throughput, yeah.
But you're still trudging your way towards your SLA without sweating about it.
Right. Nicely. So in progress on our cluster at the moment, we have protection run going on. We also have mass going on. That's successfully completed migration of 4 of the virtual machines back onto the vSAN data store, so there's only 6 still in transit. So we're getting along and definitely seeing this theme of concurrent actions going on along here. One of the conversations I had earlier in the week was with Teresa Miller about data that doesn't reside in your data center and other locations to protect data on. Jeffrey, could you queue that one up for us, and we'll just have a look at that, and then we'll come back and see these backups completing. Welcome back to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome one of my friends from the community to join us. Teresa Miller, what's your role with Cohesity?
My role when I joined Cohesity is principal technologist. So I get out and do some of this externally facing, customer facing advocacy for the team.
And one of the videos that I made recently, I referenced your own writing about, I think it was Office 365 protection that I was reading one of your articles on. Can we talk a little bit about how customers are finding they need to back up more things than they might have previously backed up?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. The interesting conversation. In terms of Office 365, the Exchange Online piece specifically, Microsoft's done a lot to do forms of data protection within the platform. So for example, minimally, you have about 30 days of recovery on a mailbox. And then if you go to deleted item recovery, you can go out from the 14-day default to 30. So that's some of the basic protection that you get. Going over and above that, customers can do some legal hold or even retention. And I think that works well for a lot of people, but the challenge actually becomes that getting the data out takes a lot of time. The searches only go to PST files, and sometimes those searches even fail and they have to start over. So there's not a ton of control over the RPOs and RTOs when it comes to what's offered natively in the product.
And there's quite a perception that if it's in the cloud, it's all somebody else's problem, that I don't need to think about protection. And it seems that there's adequate data protection for the immediate, somebody did something stupid and we need to get back that mail message they shouldn't have deleted. That seems to be fairly well covered. But not all of the compliance and legal risk element that's fairly significant when you start thinking beyond. One of my staff has done this week. That's where you see there being value in having these products and having particularly the integration with Office 365 and Cohesity?
So it's a great question. The protection piece is, to me, it's twofold. So one piece of it is you get a lot of high availability out of the product, but like you said, it doesn't protect you from what the end user does to the data. But the other piece to that is even the things that you have less control over. So mailbox ransomware, for example, if a user gets an email message that takes them to a link that all of a sudden hijacks their mailbox and they have to pay a fine or a fee to get out of it, if you had the right backup and protection solution in place, you wouldn't have to go back and pay that fine. So in terms of customer data, protecting that data is up to them. The way I like to look at it is when you were on-prem with your data exchange, for example, you would have backed it up because you don't know what could happen. So in the cloud, it's different. Your data is your data. Treat it with the same level of respect that you would have on-prem, just so that you're prepared for any of those unexpected situations. And in some cases, you could even think of it as an insurance policy. Beyond the insurance policy, you're going to have better control, though, over how fast you get that data back. It's going to be much harder if you use just like the native tools. That take a lot more time.
So speed of recovery. And the other element is that you can't outsource risk. You've got to own the risk on your own data. Microsoft's not going to go out of business if you lose data out of your Exchange environment, out of your Office 365 environment. It's your organization that goes out of business, so you're the one at risk. And so you must do that due diligence to protect yourself from that risk.
Exactly.
Are there other data platforms, or I shouldn't say data platforms, are there other data locations that you think customers need to be considering more deeply than they possibly have been?
Yeah, I think from the virtual machine perspective, so since we're talking Microsoft, let's talk a little bit about Azure. So when it comes to Azure virtual machines, by default, if the customer didn't make any changes, that system's not backed up. And one exception I can call out to that, though, is from my real world experience. I actually had a virtual machine that was corrupted from Windows updates. And through a support ticket, there were some backdoor ways that Microsoft was able to deploy to be able to get that machine back. Now, that being said, it was a production system and it took more than 24 hours. So there's that, well, how fast do you want your production system back online? I think it's wonderful that even without taking the step of the backup, that the data could come back, but it was such a slow process. So backing up virtual machines is important.
Yeah, and it seems universal for cloud providers that the virtual machine services don't include backup initially, partly because the philosophy is cloud-native applications, your virtual machine is a disposable resource, and that you protect the way that you create that virtual machine, but not the virtual machine itself. And I think that's not necessarily the way people are actually using public cloud, or at least not universally. There's definitely times when it's unique data is being created in these EC2 instances and Azure VMs and other platforms. So Teresa, thank you very much for spending a few minutes talking with me about some of these other sources of data that needs to be protected. Please stay tuned for more Build Day live videos here with Cohesity. We'll have lots more great content coming out, and thank you very much, Teresa. And our mass recovery is continuing to run. So it's, how have we gone on that mass recovery now? Still only showing the four complete. Let's take a look at the protection job for Office 365 as well, see if that's finished out. It hasn't, and my gold policy That it's now protecting the machines that have come back again.
Now we're doing a lot of stuff right now.
Lots going on in this cluster. Hey, is there a resource manager that shows me the load on my cluster?
You can actually look at monitoring and performance. So that basically gives you the overall throughput to the latency and the IOPS and the CPU charts as well. So. And then we have advanced diagnostics where you can kind of drill down to on a protection job level or a policy job to kind of figure out where what is contributing to possible performance problems.
So all of this, as we can see, we're doing quite a lot, and even though we've been doing a lot through this, we've still been sitting down at 15% CPU and memory utilization. We've read and write latency is still, what do we got? We've got a spike of read latency up to 7 milliseconds. But mostly sub 1 millisecond, and doing a reasonable amount of transactions, and that's primarily going to be limited by my lab, not by this particular appliance.
Yeah, I think your 4-node cluster we can get up to gigabytes per second quite easily.
Yeah. What other monitoring do we have in there?
You can basically check your deduplication, storage reduction over time in terms of, and this is what customers would like to track as well, right?
You know what I should do is take a look through Cohesity at my longer running lab cluster and see what we see in there in terms of the monitoring, because that's been running for a few months, although there's been a bit of outage along the way, but yeah, fairly consistent stats in there, and the utilization of resources on my virtual edition shouldn't be particularly high.
Yeah.
It hasn't been doing terribly much in the last 24 hours, but maybe the last 7 days will show us something. With some gaps for travel. Yeah, so there's good stats available in there. Again, coming back to Helios in order to see those stats across multiple machines.
Yeah, so the idea with that, right? So with Helios, it's kind of a 3-bucket thing: the multi-cluster management and having the ability for us to do predictive analytics on the data collected from all of these clusters, and we cover the app piece as well. So, sorry, you wanted to ask me?
Yeah, I was going to point out that I have in my mailbox that we've just protected. Somewhere in here, oh, it's not in that folder, it's actually in my inbox. There is actually a notification in here from Cohesity support to say that my cluster is going to hit 90% utilization in 90 days. And that's a Helios alert because my cluster isn't actually set up to send me alerts. So there's the proactive notifications out of Helios that came quite literally this week since I've been here.
Yeah, that's the beauty about that, right? And having the ability, and not just data collection across different clusters. Where we're moving to in terms of enterprise is, how efficient are you with your data management, right? And there's the ability to do basically machine learning models within the system, as well as crowdsourcing a lot of this data as well to kind of see if you are at your optimal utilization of your storage units.
Some comparative benchmarking for industries.
Exactly.
Now this has been my lab environment that we've been looking at, but you have access to much more extensive environment to show some larger scale things. Would you like to take over the driver's seat for a little bit and show us some of that?
So, all right, so this, go a little bit more closer, all right. So one of the things with Cohesity also is regardless of where you deploy it, be it on premise, and Alistair, you mentioned you have a version, or on, in any of the commercial clouds. This particular one, I'm actually doing it's actually Chris's environment that I've borrowed, but we all SEs use this for demos, where we actually have an Office 365 backup and protection jobs running perpetually, if I were to use that until now. The functionality kind of is similar across on all of your commercial clouds. So if you were to deploy Cohesity on Azure, AWS, or GCP, the look and feel and the functionality is basically the same, and that's a very important schema as well, because you're not dealing with these 100 different technologies that you're kind of aggregating into under one set system. Is just the same platform.
Consistent types of policies and consistent platform out. And incidentally, we have a video from Chris Colotti about using the Helios interface to deploy the virtual edition out onto. He deployed onto AWS. We won't have time to get to that video today, but it will be published in the playlist on YouTube. So the vBrownBag, find the Cohesity Build Day Live at Cohesity playlist, and you'll find Chris's video about deploying that. We also won't get to John Hildebrand's video about the Cloud Spin, the ability to use that DevOps functionality that's in the platform to spin up a temporary workload on some cloud provider and then have it torn down later. So that video also you'll be able to catch later. I'm sorry, I'm stopped you in the middle of the exposition here about this larger environment.
Yeah, so I think I'll focus on Office 365, right? I think we covered the protection piece of it and how it is to add it. Recovering mailboxes is let's see what Cohesity brings to the table over there, right? So again, the workflow stays the same. So from an operational standpoint, the training is minimal. I go to recovery, and like you basically did recovery of files, we did recovery of virtual machines. You could do that for SQL and Oracle databases, or just an instant volume mount out of our storage system. I can actually go and recover Office 365 mailboxes as well. And here again, we have that global search on top because we index everything underneath. I can search for a particular mailbox. Say, do I have mine over here? Probably not. But let's actually do Chris's mailbox recovery, right? So I can choose him, and again, here's the same kind of a workflow where, in case I'm interested in, recovering data from a previous set of snapshots, I can basically come over here, and this gives me the entire catalog of all the different snapshots and data protection that I've done.
And that could be really important if we've got long-term archive and we're doing an e-discovery activity and we need to get access to a mailbox condition at a particular point in time to establish when communication came through.
Right.
Those multiple points in time become very important.
Right, and also one of the things that we enable is this whole data mobility piece as well, right? So we're doing we did not cover fully, but we probably did in some of the videos, is around how we can do point-to-point replication for DR, and our ability to kind of cross-connect different cloud networks as well. There's some sort of agnosticness that we bring to the table, or regardless of whether your data is running on-premise or cloud, we treat it the same way. So you can basically, from your recovery point, can be the cloud if that's where your client is requesting the data from, or it could be on-premise. So we allow us to basically choose that particular snapshot and also decide where it needs to basically come from. And then it's as simple as you can also, and speaking specifically from an Office 365 standpoint, I could recover this to my original mailbox as well, or I could basically recover to an alternate location if I need be. So
it might be a staff member who's left the organization and you need to get their mailbox accessible to another user.
Exactly. So I'll keep that off here, and that's it. I can start recovery. And what happens is, if I actually go to I actually have a login of my restores. Pretty soon what will happen is I'll basically get another folder over here that says the recovers that's tagged to this particular recovery process that I ran. That will bring in all of Chris's emails over here. So
I really like both the ease of doing that search. So I did individual item level restores with Office 365, and it was easy to find specific messages or a folder containing messages. And then I was amazed by just how fast that data came back when I was doing individual messages.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is going to take quite a bit because Chris
has got a large mailbox.
Large mailbox. But what do we want to see next, Alistair?
Well, some things around the larger scale, because these labs are somewhat larger than you can take on a plane with you. What do we see if we've got lots of clusters and lots of protection jobs, lots of things going on in the environment?
So let's take a look at this particular lab over here. So if I actually look at sources, doing quite a bit over here. I have a VMware source that I'm protecting. I also have the ability to add AWS, GCP, Azure, or Hyper-V as a source as well. So that speaks to our breadth of the different functionalities that we can actually accommodate. And it's important to also point out that we do this at scale. So a lot of enterprises have adopted us because we're, the stability and the resiliency really shows when you actually throw a kitchen sink at a solution. And typically a lot of times, and we try to be as realistic as possible with POCs as well, because it really shows our platform when you actually throw a load on us and how we basically function in those circumstances. But it also gives us the ability to look at recover points, not just, you might have, you might be protecting VMware workloads today, but we have the ability, as Alistair mentioned, that John's going to talk about CloudSpin, and it was looked at as a test dev workflow for a large amount of time, but sometimes some of the interesting information comes from the customers themselves, where they started using this as a cloud migration strategy. Because the main function there is we can basically take a hypervisor VM, and I'd say this with Hyper-V as well, and basically convert that into an AWS, Azure, or a GCP workload, basically. So just giving us that platform agnosticness and giving basically all practical as well as strategic ideas to customers to plan their migration has been one of Cohesity's strength, based on some of the feedback that I've received as well.
And I guess there's a huge value proposition for these customers around the data efficient transfer, that you don't have to have the system down for a bulk transfer of an entire virtual machine, and the conversion into a virtual machine on the destination platform is automated, and there's a lot of value in simplifying those tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the platform goodness that that comes with it, because every time when we do a backup, when we do these archive tasks, it's using our globally duplicated data, and every time there's a transfer between two Cohesity environments, regardless of the size, regardless of the type, we're only doing a metadata handshake between those two systems. So so let's take a look at our virtual environment over here. I'm going to switch over to the vSphere environment. So this is our larger cluster, as Alistair mentioned. We have a ton of stuff over here that we're basically protecting. And if I basically go to the dashboard, I get a sense of what the storage reduction looks like as well.
Does that look like are you able to show me the global level across all clusters for the data reduction? Since the broader you look at these numbers, the more likely they are to be applicable to customers. So we're still seeing double-figure storage reduction.
Yeah, and this progressively gets better as we add more data, as we add more heterogeneous data. Because people talk about deduplication, and it's been around for a while, but a few of us in the market actually do what we call the global variable and deduplication, and a part of that is having the ability to basically fingerprint different kinds of data and being optimal for that data, but basically bringing the data under one namespace, basically.
So having a consistent way of dealing with variable data, data types and that.
Which is why we, the more heterogeneous data you throw at us, while we have to be more cautious in how we size that data, the overall efficiency is actually higher, right? So as you can see over here, this is the global storage reduction, but I've basically split this up into 3 clusters that I've seen over here. Obviously, Chris is doing some interesting things in GCP where he's seeing 400x, data reduction. But yeah, just this kind of, single pane of glass view into just something as simple as how much data reduction I'm getting is something wasn't there.
And I think one of the themes throughout is simplicity. And this I heard from Dan Frith, who is a friend of mine and a customer of Cohesity. So Jeffrey, if you could line up Dan's video, we'll just hear from him why he thinks Cohesity is so good. Welcome to another Build Day Live video here at Cohesity. At least I'm here at Cohesity's head office in San Jose. I'm joined by my friend Dan Frith, who is somewhat distant. So Dan, where are you and what do you do?
I'm in sunny Brisbane, Australia, and I currently work at Telstra as a product manager. I look after our data protection and storage for our cloud offering.
And you're using Cohesity as part of the customer-facing, was it showcase you were saying?
That's right, yeah. So we have a showcase environment, which is a big lab full of all kinds of gear, hundreds of VMs that we use to sort of demonstrate our capabilities to our customers, and we use Cohesity to protect that.
So it's a reasonably large-scale environment that looks like a customer environment, but is not actually a production customer environment. It's a good place to show new technologies and new ways of working.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
yeah,
a good sign. Yeah. And so you've got quite a lot of Cohesity in there to showcase data protection and mobility. Can you run us through a little bit which kinds of implementation of Cohesity's data platform you've got in there?
Sure. So we started with a Cohesity physical appliance with 4 nodes to get us up and running. And then we started introducing virtual editions as well. So I have 3 or 4 of those running. I have a clustered virtual edition. We also have a cloud edition running in AWS and one in Azure. We replicate data to and from those. So we've got a fair bit of flexibility in terms of what we can do with the data platform.
So that is, again, showcasing what it's like to be a pretty much an enterprise deployment of Cohesity data platform across multiple implementation types. And you've had this for a while, haven't you? You've reading your writings about it on your Penguin Punk blog for quite a while, several months at least.
Yeah, it's been a good 15 months. We sort of started at Telstra at the same time as Cohesity started in ANZ. So yeah, we've been on from day one, and it's been pretty cool.
And what's your general impression? What do you like about the platform?
My general impression's been great. The day 0 experience is obviously really good, and the day 1 and day 2 stuff is been pretty good as well. So things like Helios, we use that extensively to manage the environment from anywhere. We don't need to log into individual element managers to do stuff. We can do it all from one screen, which is the magic one screen. And it's just been very easy to run. The auto protect feature is great. So I just pointed at a source like a vCenter or an NFS share, and away it goes. It does its thing. It does it on time. Lets me know if there's problems. Support have been really, and it's just been a very positive experience.
Right. And so what kind of, you said hundreds of virtual machines and lots of terabytes of storage protected in there. I'm just trying to think what else is one of the challenges is this stuff is simple to use, and it's hard to explain simple other than saying it's simple and showing it. What are some of the proof points that you use when you are talking to customers about using Cohesity? What kind of things, as you're talking with customers, seems to resonate with them and make them think this is a good idea?
Yeah, so excuse me. So I think one of the big things for us is that we've been able to show them we can add a large amount of workload to the environment pretty simply. We apply a protection job or a policy to that workload, and we let it do its thing. So a lot of our customers come to us from, I guess, traditional enterprise environments where they've had, 40 or 50 different schedules for various workloads. And Cohesity allows us to really point them at something and go, this is just really simple to use. You don't need to worry about scheduling anymore. You don't need to worry as much about basically when things happen and how they happen. You just need to worry about whether you can recover or not, which is a big part of the story as well.
So it's much more about a set of policies that are applied rather than a day-to-day monitoring of scheduling and completion times and those kinds of, particularly dealing with the anomalies when things didn't back up correctly, as we used to see in legacy backup solutions.
Yeah, that's right. I guess it's a more outcome-focused solution, so rather than just a periodic backup. or a periodic protection product. It's something that's focused on, you need to protect this up to this point and for this long. We'll make sure that happens, and we'll let you know if there's a problem.
And are you seeing demand and adoption of the more data mobility, DevOps kind of releasing value of the data stored in data protection? Is that something that customers are asking for or wanting when they hear it's possible?
There's certainly a lot of interest in those kind of solutions, particularly when customers get their head around what they can actually do. I think the big thing for them is getting past the fact that they can actually leverage the data for something else. That's been eye-opening for a lot of people. Traditionally, you take a snap of some data, put it somewhere else, someone else works on it. Now with Cohesity, we can offer that type of solution to customers, and they don't have to really work that hard to get extra value out of the data.
Nice. And then I guess what else would you like to see in the Cohesity platform that you think that they might be a nice value add that your customers might see some more benefit from? Naturally, it's a wish list, not a plan list for Cohesity. But are there things that you're looking for them to add in the near future?
I'm actually pretty happy. I guess the type of workloads that we promote internally and externally to our customers are the sort of things that Cohesity deals with really well already. I'm certainly interested to see how the app marketplace continues to evolve, and not just what Cohesity can do with that, but what third parties. There's already been some interesting apps developed for that, and I'd like to see where that goes in the future. That's going to be really interesting for us.
As another way of unlocking the value of the data that's stored on the Cohesity platform.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Well, excellent, Dan. If people have been intrigued by the things you've talked about, where else can they find you online and in social media?
So you can find me on the internet at penguinpunk.net/blog. You can find me on Twitter at penguinpunk. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Snapchat. I'm around. I look like Wolverine let himself go, if you ever see me in person, so it shouldn't be too hard to spot.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for joining us from sunny Brisbane. And thank you for joining us watching this Build Day Cohesity content. Keep watching for more great videos. It's always good to have an opportunity to chat with Dan. I just need to meet up with him more in person so we can have a drink together. Looking at our Build Day Live cluster here, our recovery has completed. Our instant mass recovery of those 10 machines has completed out, and where was our 35-minute duration of that? 29 minutes was waiting for the storage vMotions to complete.
Yep.
But we have all of those virtual machines now up and operational on our vSphere cluster. So that recovery is completed out, and it seems to have behaved really nicely. In the protection jobs, we saw a begin of the protection of the gold policy, and we've got a warning on its status. It probably couldn't quite complete out this pass, but I'm sure it will run again. And we can see that the Outlook protection is still running, so it's a good thing you were able to demonstrate that.
Yep.
Chris's. And finally, the cloud replication, cloud archive, is still chugging along and going to take a little while. Again, I don't think that's representative of what it's like in an enterprise scale network. It's there's some restrictions on our production network here.
Yeah, typically the first full that goes to the cloud takes some time because it's the first hydration of that data there. Everything that's subsequent is very fast. So we're looking at I have instances of multiple terabytes with changes that happen, and it can basically replicate every 15 minutes to an archive data without any problem. But yeah, the first one usually is the longest, after which
you can manage that a bit by progressively adding virtual machines or whatever it is that you're protecting into the protection job over time, so you don't get this one massive copy over time. So it's not that's hard to manage.
we can stage that for sure.
We did have one query around backup products and life cycling. So if I've got an existing enterprise backup product in play, what does it look like as I start to adopt Cohesity? Is there ways to leverage Cohesity with existing products? How does that play?
So we have integrations with all the major vendors like the Isilons and the NetApps and stuff like that. So we can basically connect to it via an NAS adapter and basically start backing that up. Typically, and that's where our value is not disruptive in the sense that you need to basically rip and replace everything. Once we at least with my customers, once I get them to understand the value, we'll solve the main pain point first, and the main pain could be something like data protect, or could be scale out NAS, or it could be data migration. So depending upon the breadth of the problem, the same solution can apply to all. So we'll just connect to that particular storage system and start taking one pain point at a time. And we'll start doing data protection to begin with, and start basically bringing the data under this global deduplication platform, and then slowly address all the different silos that are present, bring that under one platform, and by the time we're after we do the entry, after a couple of points, the customers kind of get where we're going, and they sort of do this themselves and come back to me and say, hey, I just migrated this vSphere to Nutanix in 2 minutes. Thank you. And I'm like, oh, you should have let me know, but
I would have loved to have helped you with that, but clearly customers are finding it easy to use, as we heard from Dan, and liking that.
And actually is a tangible use case that happened last week to me. So
excellent.
Yeah.
So I think we're drawing to a close. I think it's a good time to look back. So what have we done today?
All right, so quite a bit of things, right? So we started off by installing the cluster from scratch. With all the equipment you have, you made this so easy, Alistair. We connected to the one node, got all the 4 nodes online inside of about 5 minutes. Created a policy. We did protection of VMware jobs. We did long-term archive. We did what did we do next? We did long-term archive, and then we did Helios as well. We added our cluster to a global single pane of glass SaaS platform that we offer. We installed Splunk on it.
We had to do a version upgrade before we could install Splunk as well.
That's the biggest thing I missed. Yeah, we did version upgrade prior to all of this. So while we were backing up, we did an upgrade of our software. This is literally my day at a customer doing POC or a pilot implementation. We did that. We saw the benefits of Helios. We saw Splunk running, and then we did different granular restores as well. We did a restore of a file to your desktop that you can send to an email. We did a restore of a couple of files that through an SMB share that you could recover. We did a virtual machine recovery, as well as instant mass restore of 20 odd VMs that you had. So, and then we took a look at Office 365 as well, in terms of what Cohesity brings to the table there.
It's a fairly comprehensive amount of data protection and mobility covered in 3 hours and 20 minutes. We've already talked about some of the things we didn't get to because we had so much content. So do watch for more content coming out over time. And particularly one of the other highlights was Jim Wild, who was another customer, talking to us about how he rolled in a lot of Cohesity to replace a legacy backup environment. And that's worth a listen and a look. And we also didn't quite get to Raj Duth talking about how the ransomware protection capabilities that we have with the Cohesity platform. So that's another great video that you'll be able to catch as we release them out. So definitely stay tuned for more content. This has been a great fun week. We always spend a week with the customers that we're doing all-day live events with, and we've spent this week here at the Cohesity head offices in San Jose, working with the technical advocacy group. So Chris and John and Mike and Teresa, who unfortunately didn't get to be here with us this week. And then of course we're the guests of the marketing department, and so particular thanks to Lynn for having us here. Also with us doing social media, Tracy doing the social media for the Build Day Live And we've had Linda Sim in the room with us doing the Cohesity side of the social media. As always, my awesome producer is sitting behind the cameras. Jeffrey has been powering through, as Mr. Powers does, all of the production and all of the post work. Whenever we finish our day of being in front of the camera, it's the second day of, Jeffrey has to start his second day of being in front of the video editing.
Tons of stuff that needs to be done, and yeah, but it's all worth it because it's a great time, and to get you guys educated with this stuff it's just amazing. So thank you guys for watching.
And indeed from me also, thank you for joining us. Do get in touch with us if you think there's a vendor that you'd like to hear from, and we certainly will start approaching vendors that our listeners would like to hear and see Build Day Live events for. And of course, if you are a vendor who would like to have a Build Day Live event, also reach out to us. I'm Alistair at vBrownBag.com. I think, thank you very much, particularly Bharath, for being with me for the whole 3.5 hours on camera. I know you're used to being in front of people, but this is a fairly intense event, so thank you very much for joining me on camera.
You guys are awesome. It was great working with you, and just bringing the authenticity and just tangible workflows to our customers is so powerful. So thank you for helping us do that.
It's been our pleasure, and all of the challenges of doing this stuff live, and the sweat through this week of making it all work as we've been in town. Thank you all for joining us. This has been the Build Day Live here at Cohesity. Stay in touch with us, and remember to head back to builddaylive.com/Cohesity for more of the content that we produced.